Hello and welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel and to our live stream Q&A, Ask Me Anything, where you can ask me, a historian, in my usual smoking jacket attire, turning me from just friendly neighborhood history into good old History Hefner, anything you'd like about history or social studies. We usually do this every Friday and Saturday, but today we have a special for you. We have 2 hours of friendly neighborhood history, 2 hours of Q&A, where you can ask me anything you'd like about various historical topics or ideas that you are thinking about. Please just drop a topic, comment, question in the chat, and I will get to it in a timely manner, as reasonably and quickly as I can. If you're enjoying this content, please be sure to like and subscribe, all of the other stuff, yada yada. But I really am happy for all the support we have here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, where we are over 10,000, almost 10,200 strong here. So I really appreciate all of that. And we are into 5 digits. We are we are about a year and a half old as a channel, a little more than that, coming up on our 2-year anniversary soon enough. But we've been doing these live streams for about a year and a half now, and they've been a great way to grow the channel, get attention on the channel and everything. So anything you can do helps. Becoming a friendly neighborhood historian is as easy as liking and subscribing. There's also memberships that are available. If you want early access and bonus content, you can give a super chat to donate to the channel to help us. Any of the money that you give us goes back into the channel to improve the quality of the content and the material that we produce for you. And this is a perfect day to do friendly neighborhood history because it is a nice rainy day, and I'm going to choose a nice appropriate historical background. My moderator Harry is here. I'm good, Harry. I hope you are well as well. And yes, since it's so rainy, let's sail the 7 seas with a nice Spanish galleon in the background from the medieval early modern period. And obviously the Spanish galleons became the envy of the world in the 16th century, doing everything they could to encourage and bring back the Spanish Empire. So yes, we are indeed back. I'm back in my friendly neighborhood history attire. I'm back for our usual Q&As, Ask Me Anything, where you can ask me anything you'd like about history and social studies. And we will be back tomorrow for an hour special of a live stream lecture, which you can vote on or directly here on YouTube for which topic you would like addressed. And if you have an idea for a topic, please drop it in that chat. You can follow me on social media such as Instagram or Facebook. You can read my writings on my blog at Substack, or you can get some access to bonus content, including my First Lady series on Patreon, as well as other things that are available. I hope everybody is having a really great weekend. Yep. So we are indeed back. Emir's here, Hars is here, so I've got my wonderful moderators holding down the chat. And what questions do you have about history or social studies? If this is your first time, we welcome you. We're so glad you're here, and many of you that are here are indeed friendly neighborhood historians, tried and true, have been coming to the channel for a long time. So a namaste to you as well, Pravanad. And British monarchy might be one of the topics. I'm not sure exactly what the topic will be, but I certainly hope that you're there to join us. As History Hefner in his robe, his smoking jacket, which is a British invention, by the way, will be bringing you some friendly neighborhood history tomorrow. So I'm really appreciating that. We have short form content here every day on YouTube, and we also have long form videos that usually drop every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. I wasn't able to do the one yesterday, so I'll be dropping that later tonight, and that one will be compilation video on British monarchs just in time maybe for our live stream lecture tomorrow. So welcome Bill, all the way from what was the town they were in? I forget what the town they were in. Topic for tomorrow: the history of the Romanovs. Oh, that's a great topic. Ooh, yeah, definitely a great topic. I don't know, $5 for a super chat, which I really appreciate, by the way. All the money you give to the channel goes back into the channel. The Romanovs would be a fascinating thing to talk about. Obviously, the 300-year-long dynasty ended with Nicholas and Alexandra being overthrown and then assassinated by the Bolsheviks in 1918. Starts with Mikhail Romanov, who saves Russia from Smutnya and Ravenia, the time of troubles, in 1613. Such a fascinating thing. Do you eat cornstarch? No. Improve the lives of those around the world. Well, hopefully knowledge is power, and knowledge has an improving effect, so that's what I'm doing here. What are your thoughts on Charlie Kirk? You know, I was asked a lot about this when he first died, and I eventually restricted it so that if you want in-depth political analysis from a social scientist, which is what I am, which is what this channel is, it's usually a super chat because we want to refocus and reorient everything to the historical side of what we do. That being said, Kirk is one of the most important political commentators in recent American history, and when you consider the influence of social media and the internet and television compared to previous eras, Kirk may be the most influential political commentator in American history thus far. And he's the only political commentator, the only what you could call political activist, I think, who has actually been killed in that manner, who was not a politician. It's quite fascinating. Well, it's not fascinating. It's quite sad and shocking, but it's quite interesting when you consider the impact of Kirk and his organization. Whatever you think about his political views, obviously him dying was an absolute and horrible tragedy. Um, yeah, there's a thing more powerful. Michael, thank you for the gift. Really appreciate it. Um, there's a thing more powerful than no. I don't know what that says because I've got the goat thing in there. There's a thing more powerful than knowledge. Guess what it is? Knowledge is one form of power, but there are many other forms of power. Doris, hello. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Imagine taking political advice from a guy with a bathrobe. It's not a bathrobe, it's a smoking jacket, and it actually isn't used as a bathrobe. It was originally used by British soldiers who came back from the Crimean War, and because they had helped the Ottoman Turks, the Turks gave them a lot of tobacco. That tobacco was smoked in pipes. However, the interesting thing is that in order not to get the stain and the smell on their clothes, they developed this. Of course, the British were well known for their textile industries during the Industrial Revolution, which was happening at the time of the Crimean War. The British would actually take the would put these clothes on, smoking jacket is called, so that they could smoke and not have a smell all over their regular clothes. So there's a little bit of history for you. Um, what do you think of Mussolini, Italian dictator? Well, I mean, what do I think of Mussolini? Obviously, one of the most brutal people in the 20th century. In fact, the Italians were the first ones to use chemical weapons and chemical warfare, really engaging in biological warfare on a level unforeseen before when they invaded Ethiopia. So before the Nazis and the Imperial Japanese got going, the Italians were already very active in Ethiopia. Um, yes, it's like Hugh Hefner, but it's history, so it's history Hefner. I'm doing well, Matt. How are you, Unc? What might become of Venezuela? I don't know. It depends on how active the United States wants to get in there. Obviously, Venezuela has been hampered in recent years because of issues with cartels, issues with kleptocracy, a lot of plutarchs kind of seizing wealth and power and just trying to gain as much power as they possibly can. And the Maduro regime is one of the most corrupt in the world. So, what do you think about Kaby Lame? Don't know. Ethiopia had never been invaded. It was invaded in 1935 by the Italians. Haile Selassie was thrown out of power, went to the League of Nations, condemned the actions of the Italians, and became a superstar in the Rastafari. He's the Rastafarian Messiah and a hero to the Ethiopian people because he was the one who drew attention to the war crimes and human rights abuses of Mussolini and the fascist Italians when they invaded Ethiopia. And yes, this is a picture of Spanish galleons going off to colonize the New World circa 16th century. Let me see here. Yep. Let me see. If you could rewrite one single foundational truth about the universe, the law of physics, and emotional constant, or historical certainty, knowing that doing so would fundamentally change who you are. Ooh, that's a tough one. That's a nice little hypothetical. Of course, it would be a historical event because I'm a historian. I would keep Lincoln alive. And I know the world would be very, very different if Lincoln were kept alive. But I do think he would have handled Reconstruction properly. He wouldn't have had Andrew Johnson's Southern connections, creating bias. He wouldn't have gotten impeached like Johnson did. So yeah, the Italians already had Libya, but they attacked Ethiopia. Let me see here. Would you resort to cannibalism if necessary? I mean, human beings have done that throughout all of history. I mean, you think of the Donner Party, one of the most infamous party examples of that. What's more powerful than knowledge? Tell us. Well, I don't know. You said that something was more powerful than knowledge. Knowledge is one form of power. Wisdom is probably even more important than knowledge. How you use that knowledge. And one of the reasons that one of the reasons I do this is not just to dispense historical knowledge, but to dispense the lessons that history teaches us. The historiography, the analysis of history and what has happened in the past, obviously gives us a way to look at the world in front of us and to learn from it. And the lesson, the truism is, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and those who know history are doomed to watch it repeat itself. And I don't believe history exactly repeats itself. I like Mark Twain's aphorism that history tends to rhyme a lot. But the truth of the matter is those who don't learn from history are doomed to rhyme with it and to see horrible things happen. And usually that's a negative omen. Of course, there's a lot of good lessons from history too. Britannia ruled and rules the waves. Yes, they had the greatest navy in human history, and that started in many ways with Henry VIII, but it also started with them defeating the Spanish Armada in 1588. Chemical warfare was used long before that biological attacks in the way. No. Let me see here. Mussolini was actually a primary school teacher. Can you imagine the sight? Benito Mussolini was a primary school teacher. He was, and he became radicalized because, like many Italians, he felt that Italy, who had during the Great War, Italy turned on Germany and Austria-Hungary, who they had an alliance with, and sided with the Russians, French, and British. But they didn't get much reward when it came to Versailles and what actually happened after the war was over. Because they didn't get the rewards that they felt was necessary out of the Paris Peace Accords, which ended the Great War. They didn't get the land, territory, and resources, and they'd obviously had hundreds of thousands die or tens of thousands die and had suffered immensely. They went into a deep depression. There was a lot of a cultural rot and decay, and the fascism became one ideology that sought to help to give Italy revenge, to give it back the glory that it had believed it had deserved from that war. Let me see here. And yes, follow our social media handles. There it is. Let me see. Catching up with the chat. If you haven't had your question answered, I promise I will do it. So why don't they speak Italian in Ethiopia like French-speaking African, Algeria, Mali, Chad, Ivory Coast? I don't know why you have to yell it by doing all caps, but basically the Italian invasion of Ethiopia eventually failed thanks to the intervention of the British and later the Americans, who put Selassie back in power and drove the Italians out of Ethiopia and eventually out of North Africa entirely. If I'm correct, Libya was decolonized after the war, and the Italians lost whatever colonies they had had. They had colonized Libya back in the 19th century. What are your thoughts on the Mexican-American War? One of America's biggest, grandest military successes that you probably don't know about involved conquering all of Mexico and then giving half of it back to the Mexican people and retaining the Southwest and California. Let me see. Ben Shapiro is a prominent conservative political commentator, while the main commentator on the Young Turks is Cenk Uygur. Are they bigger or smaller than the guy that... No, I don't really care about any of those people. Because Italy didn't own it for very long. France owned most of its empire from the 1880s to the 1960s. If truth is more powerful than knowledge, then why are lies more powerful than truth? Lies are not more powerful than truth. Truth is more powerful, but lies are dangerously close. Let me see. What is wisdom? Wisdom is knowledge put into practical application. I don't know why you're asking me that, but yeah. Do you think the famous saying, history is written by the victors, is true? If so, then why should history be viewed as wisdom? No, I don't think history is fully written by the victors. I think our interpretations of history are often written by the victors. But especially now, we have so much access to so many different sources and so many voices that it's very hard to only hear history from the center. You can hear history from the margins all the time. History from below, as it's called. Yeah. If lies are, because I mean, Egypt was nominally independent since 1922, and no one can argue that Egypt's, yeah, I know about that. So, anyways, other questions about history or social studies, social sciences. Hope you're all having a really great weekend. If you enjoyed what I've talked about, please like and subscribe. We'll be here, hopefully, for 2 hours. No, Derek, I am not, and I think that you probably are, and are either hoping that I am, or are dealing with coming out, and therefore need some advice. But no, I can't give you any advice there because I don't know anything about that. I just love this. People come onto the channel and want to know all about my personal life. I don't share anything about my personal life. I don't share my religious or political beliefs. I don't share my relationship status. I don't share my name. I don't share my occupation. I don't share my location. I keep things private because my job is to bring history to you. Who really cares at the end of the day? Exactly. I mean, some people do. I mean, obviously, some people who've been here for a long time wants to know what my certain ideas about the world are, but I don't share that because my job is to talk about social studies with all of you guys. I mean, eventually, if we get to be a big enough platform and we have and this is something that I'm doing full time, and I'm making enough money where I'm becoming kind of a name in the community, I'm sure I will reveal more information about myself just because people are going to figure it out and expose me or whatever. But I generally don't have people. I have people I know who follow the channel, but they don't tell people who I am. So yeah. Aisha got her shout out, Brandon. Pick me a winner. Steelers beat Bengals hopefully tomorrow. Do you think the British Empire or French Empire were better at decolonization and coming to terms with losing its world power status? I think the British tended to be a little bit more successful with that. The French had a lot of problems with that in Algeria and Vietnam, although the French were generally known for being more beneficent to their colonial peoples, to the Native Americans, for instance, when they colonized parts of Canada. The French had a reputation for being pretty beneficent, but their empire died in a massive struggle in places like Algeria and Vietnam, where they both fought 2 wars. Bills will destroy the Steelers. Bills aren't playing the Steelers. They will lose to Tampa Bay tomorrow. So there you go. The world is a little better without having Kirk in it. That's really awful and not true necessarily. I mean, just because you don't like his politics doesn't mean it's a good thing that he's dead. I mean, is the world better because Hitler isn't in here? Yeah, and I hate his politics, but that doesn't mean that someone with a non-violent political belief system is really supposed to be okay that they're dead. Can you believe that my ideology, the political compass, is purely conservatism? Like I'm as pure as it gets. Yes, I'm not surprised at all. It's fascinating. My two moderators, Hars is an American who's on the right. Harry is a British nationalist who's also a socialist, so he's a national socialist. I don't know which one is worse. Can't believe he just said that. I'm economically center and socially far right. Okay, then. Yeah. I mean, the French tried to get Ethiopia, the British tried to get Ethiopia, but the Ethiopians were really good because they were Christians, so they had a lot of connections to a lot of cultural connections to the Europeans, but also due to the wisdom of their emperors like Menelik II and, of course, Haile Selassie, they remained independent. Napoleon killed in the millions? Yeah. I think about 4 to 6 million people died in the Napoleonic Wars. Hello, Faraz. Great to see you again. That makes that person horrible. Whoever wishes death on someone is disgusting. Yeah, that's pretty fair. Kirk was assassinated because of his views on Israel and he had too much influence. Yeah, that's nonsense. Stop listening to Candace Owens. Did Napoleon cause the Great War? No. Napoleon's defeat set up a system by which the Europeans no longer fought overland wars on the continent and were far more, at least major ones, and were far more interested in overseas colonization, which created the large empires that caused the Great War. Napoleon did not cause the Great War, but he did cause most of the things that happened in the 18th century, at least, or the 19th century, at least unintentionally. Would you call Napoleon a warmonger? Yes, absolutely. Napoleon was very good at picking wars and picking fights just by putting his brother in charge of Spain. He created a civil war in Spain and Portugal that lasted for until his own demise. You are under mind control of the Illuminati faction, the Jesuit order. Yeah, the Jesuits were invented in the 16th century. Jesus lived in the 1st century AD. Christianity predates the Jesuits by about 15 centuries. So I'm pretty sure that Jesus existed, and I'm pretty sure the Jesuits have nothing to do with me. So, yes. Let me see here. How did nationalism affect the Industrial Revolution in Europe? It started competitiveness, right? Yeah, there was a sense of national pride and identity, and of course, the best nation, for your nation to be better, it needs to be economically more prosperous. So, industrializing and colonizing created a competition and a race between many of the Europeans, which leads to the Great Game, which leads to between Russia and Great Britain and in Central Asia, leads to the scramble for Africa, it leads to a bunch of things. But yeah, I'm doing a series on the Industrial Revolution. It'll be for members only, and I'm going to be covering the different sectors of the Industrial Revolution, the political, the economic, the social. So check that out soon, but it's only for members. Sorry, when did the UK try to get Ethiopia? It was the UK that was one of the first countries to try and intervene when Italy made. Yes, that's in the 30s. I'm talking about the 1880s. And Italy tried to get them in the 80s. I know that too. Let me see here. Candace just wants to figure out who shot her best friend. What's wrong with that? Nothing's wrong with Candace trying to figure out things, but I think she's deranged on a lot. What was the turning point that led to the decline of the British Empire into what it is today in such a short amount of time? The United States basically bullying it into giving up its colonies and pressure from the Soviet Union. Basically, Britain becoming a secondary power during the Cold War. Really put pressure from its greatest ally, the United States, and its greatest foe, the Soviet Union, to give up its empire. And so they begrudgingly did in many cases. Do you like Stalin or Mao better? I don't like either. It's who I dislike more, and I think Stalin is far more... We know a lot more and we fear a lot more of Stalin because of Orwell, because of he's Western, because of the Cold War, but never underestimate that Mao killed 40 million people. Do you think Catherine the Great was a female dictator? I always hear different opinions from historians. Me personally, she did good and bad considering she was a female for her time. But I don't see the Russian autocrats, I don't see monarchs, even if they're autocratic monarchs, even, Louis XIV, me Dieu et mon droit, my God and my rights, and I am the state, je suis the state. I don't see that absolutism, even neo-absolutism of Franz Joseph in Austria-Hungary, or the Russian Empire of the Romanovs to be necessarily dictatorship. It's a hierarchy where it's not led by a political organization, but by a family that has ties to that land. And basically, the way a monarchy and a monarchical hierarchy works is you had someone who united a group of people or did something really great once, and that made them a monarch. And then the assumption is that their bloodline is superior and will continue to produce people of great stature. As a Westerner, as a Democrat, as somebody who is, and by Democrat I mean small d Democrat, not necessarily the other Democrat. My whole point is that you have socially, you have the idea of meritocracy, of earning your way, of someone good replacing someone else who is good, and children being different from their parents, and one being good, one being bad. All of that possibility. Look at Marcus Aurelius and Commodus. If you want to go back to Roman history, it's self-evident, but it wasn't self-evident to the Europeans of the Middle Ages and into the early modern period with the Russians. So I don't see it as a dictatorship, but it certainly had a lot of autocratic power. How are you doing? Are you an economic analyst, political analyst? I'm a historian, and this is my history channel, my live stream. But I talk about those things only in the context of history. Britain officially lost its status as a world superpower in 1956 due to the Suez Crisis, which showed that Britain was completely unable to actually exercise power. Fair point. Charlie was chosen by God, and he was just spreading the word like God wanted him to do, who God took him for himself. Okay, Jackie, believe whatever you want. Yes. Why are certain regimes still allowed to operate like Kim's dictatorship? Why has the UN not intervened? Because the UN is powerless without the United States giving it its rubber stamp. The United Nations, the real, and that's a cynical approach, but the United Nations ideally is supposed to be operating for peace and human rights. But peace, maintaining structure and balance in the world has been the goal of the United Nations since it was created in the 1940s, which is why it allowed the Soviet Union and communist China to sit on its councils. I'm trying to remember the name of its higher council, Security Council, even though they were obviously huge abusers of human rights. Creating balance and maintaining a peaceful order has been the goal of the United Nations ever since then. It doesn't see the need to create large-scale wars and huge geopolitical conflicts by going into North Korea, which could trigger China and all sorts of other issues. Why do you think Candace is deranged? I would like to know, just curious. I think she's... I listened to her a lot in college. I'm not going to say how much I agreed with or disagreed with her, and she seemed like a regular mainstream conservative. Something has obviously changed. She has become extraordinarily radicalized. For somebody who's just this ultimate red pill where you just go way off of original mainstream politics. She doesn't believe in science. She doesn't believe it's more than just not believing in the vaccine. She doesn't believe in science. She doesn't believe the moon landing is real. She doesn't believe a lot of pretty much agreed upon fact. And I think that she's gone way off the political reservation on the right. And her and other people on that faction are trying to move the conservative movement or the America First movement, whatever you want to call it, in their own direction, way past anything that Donald Trump ever envisioned, for instance. Yeah. But yes, thank you, Ace. This is my smoking jacket. It's a British invention from the 19th century. Even though Britain had truly lost status as a superpower by 1943 and have been America's lapdog ever since, well, we also have Americans working for us, which goes both ways. Yeah, that's not true, but okay. You also don't help that China protects their little puppet friend. Well, he's not really little, but yeah. God nor devil exists, you fool. Okay. They did not fall. They established certain central banks. That's not true. This is the Roman Empire became the Roman Catholic Church, and if you look at the centralized social and political power of Christendom or Europe in the Middle Ages, yes, the church exudes a lot of influence, but nothing compared to the Roman Empire. Let me see. I think Friendly History is just a Tory and hates America in the War of 1812 and salty they couldn't do more to the U.S. thing. Yes, I'm clearly, even though I push back on Harry all the time and his ultra-British protections, Horace, my other moderator, thinks that I hate America. This is what I get all the time. I get people who accuse me of being too left-wing, people who accuse me of being too right-wing. That means that I'm doing something right, because the job of the historian is to tell the truth. The job of the historian is to be objective and thoughtful. And if I am being objective and thoughtful by telling you guys the truth, then I'm going to get hate from people who just want the truth to reflect their views. Do you think we are going to war with Venezuela? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think the United States has become too adverse to war. To whom you know who. See, this is basically all. See, there's only one more group of people that is obsessed with Jews than and the Israel issue than Jews in Israel themselves, and that is groypers on the internet who hate Jews. And that's what I've found in my experience. And I don't know where they come from, but they come out of the woodwork on this channel and other places all the time, and everything is the Jews. The Jews, the Jews, the Jews did everything. Just considering how many people were killed in the name of the Bible, an argument could be made that the ideology is more dangerous than Nazism. No, not necessarily. What benefits did Nazism provide to the world that Christianity did? Because Christianity and Judaism provided many benefits to the world. I can't, as a historian, it's not even a religious perspective, it's a historical fact. That higher education was created by the church. Chivalry, which curtailed some of the more darker impulses of what's called the Dark Age, was invented by the church. If you want a medieval example, hospitals, charities, orphanages, these are all products that come out of the Judeo-Christian woodwork and ethic. It's the same thing that people who talk about radical Islam do not talk about the ethical virtues in Islam that have been represented throughout all of Islamic history. Did the Austrian painter escape, or did he commit suicide? I think he took his own life. America's conservative movement is controlled by Israel. Yeah, that's, again, more nonsense, because everything is Israel, everything is Jews to these people. They're more obsessed with Jews than Jews are. And I'm someone who has a lot of experience with Judaism. I'm not saying that I'm Jewish. I'm not actually Jewish, but yes, I have a lot of experience with Jewish, and there's only one group of people who's more obsessed with Jews than the Jewish people are themselves, and that's anti-Semites. Yeah. There you go. You're watching me. Hopefully you're on a Spanish galleon sailing to the New World to conquer new lands. But hopefully you'll be nice to the natives and not try to get them sick. What is the impact of billionaires, the mega rich in politics? Like Elon, has this happened in the past, similar manner? And if so, what was the impact? Oh, of course, the robber barons were extremely influential. Think of Tammany Hall, the Democratic Center in New York, and all the money that was involved in that. Money in politics is nothing new. And the more money that's in politics, the worse it seems to get. So let's see here. The Holy Spirit is just the heart chakra activation in disguise, Kundalini energy, and the chakra systems is the spiritual mechanism all humans possess. So you're going to take a religion that's from the Middle East and say it's really just all based in Hinduism, which is from India. Yeah, that's unconscionably untrue. I've never called you disingenuous or anything like that. I just merely disagree agreeably. I don't think you agreeably disagree about anything when it comes to the British Empire. Let me see. I don't criticize your position. I criticize how you express it and how you discuss your views. It's illogical and you ignore facts so much. Or on Ben, I don't do any of that. So you're wrong. Let me see here. This is truly the time of truth and everything. As the Bible has predicted, it has come true, and the Israel God is fulfilling all of his promises. So, see, and then you get the other people who are just obsessed with Israel, and Israel is the greatest thing in the universe. I don't like this idea from a lot of people that you have to pretend that, you can't ever criticize Israel no matter what. No, you can criticize Israel as much as you want. There's certainly good questions to be raised. That doesn't make you an anti-Semite to do that. But people who are obsessed with Israel on the one end are going to say that you are going to act like they're the victim. So I can't criticize Israel no matter what. That's nonsense. It's balderdash. And then people on the other side are going to say, well, you can't criticize. Israel is wonderful and amazing, and nothing is wrong with it at all. And these people are not just Jews. There's many Jews who are very critical of Israel. These are people usually on the religious right who are just obsessed with Israel. I think it's nonsense. I think a moderate, thoughtful perspective is that Israel is a country with a history, a shorter history, albeit than the United States or, of course, Great Britain, but has every right to be criticized based on the merits of what it has done historically in the past. The question of Israel's creation is huge morally. There's no country in the world that gets the moral pushback on its very existence that Israel does. We don't sit around and say, should India exist? Well, actually, Pakistanis do. But we don't sit around and say, should France exist? Should Russia exist? Do they have a right to their land? We don't do this with any other country, but we do it with Israel all the time. And conversely, the Palestinians also have been dispossessed because of everything that Israel did in 1948. them and Israel are constantly being called into question of, do they have a right to exist and a right to some part of a land? You don't see this in other places of the world. Even the criticisms of the United States and its creation because of the mistreatment of the Native Americans, which of course is a real and horrible thing, is totally theoretical, because none of the people who actually say that would ever envision the United States just ceasing to exist and that land being repossessed by a very small percentage of natives from the tribes that are left over. It's just not going to happen. But there is this constant question, historically, of Israel's very existence, and that's, I guess, to be warranted because it's 77 years old. So I'm tired of this back and forth where it's, you have to be wonderfully in love with Israel, or and if you are, you must be bought out by AIPAC and they control you. Yes, if AIPAC was giving me money to run this channel, I wouldn't be talking about history with you guys. Yes, let me see. I would argue those benefits would also happen without organized religion, but the damage would never happen. 3, Abrahamic religions definitely did more damage than good. No, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I think religion is just a vehicle by which cultures express themselves. All cultures must have something that ties them together, and spiritual beliefs are part of that. Hinduism is so inconsequential to India. Go watch my long-form video on the Varna system, the caste system in India, and you'll see just how integral it is to the people there for us. I think that religion is an inevitable reality of human existence, and if we were to somehow hypothetically create a society or a world without religion, you would still have the same problems, just in different ways. People are going to use and abuse power and use their belief system, whatever they create, be it Nazism, fascism, or communism. Those are all pretty atheistic to the most part, in order to destroy life or to seize power. So there's people who are a-religious who run countries and have done an extremely good job at it, and there's people that are religious that are extremely awful, and vice versa. It goes all the way. It's really about what people are trying to do. Let me see here. Which is why America should adopt European election rules, which are actual rules that actually do something. Don't care, Harry. Really don't care. Finally, somebody is talking about the subject to make sense. I'm trying to. Jews are fine. Modern Israel, for the most, aren't even Jewish. They're mostly Eastern Europeans with Jewish ancestry and DNA in them. They are Ashkenazi Jews. Saying that they're Eastern Europeans is true, but they're Eastern European Jews. So it's this incredible thing that for centuries nobody doubted that there were Ashkenazi Jews in Europe. Look at how heavily they were persecuted by the church and by the Crusades and things like that. But now it's all of a sudden surprising to us that, oh, well, they weren't really Jews to begin with, because you're playing the no true Scotsman fallacy because you've bought a bunch of nonsense about their claim to the land in Israel. The many books and stories in the Bible are symbolic parable for Eastern mysticism, not to be taken as literal history besides geographic locations. I don't understand at any point in time in history where Eastern religions of Buddhism and Hinduism and Shinto, for that matter, or Taoism, or whatever philosophy, religion of the East, was able to get over and conquer the Middle East and import these views there by force. That has never happened. It was the other way around, actually. Alexander got all the way to India before he was forced to turn back. Let me see here. I am proud to be an Iranian. Does that make me nationalist? I lean left economically like Bernie Sanders. Am I a socialist? Am I a national socialist? Well, I mean, you're allowed to be a nationalist. I mean, I think a lot of people are nationalists, but Harry's really a nationalist. And yes, I do know that Mamdani won. I'm not stupid. I don't live under a bush. Hinduism did not come from Iran. Well, unless you're considering the Indo-Aryan peoples, but Hinduism, the precepts of Hinduism were already on display, Manu, well before the Vedic period in which the Indo-Aryans conquered and settled India. Just watch my video on the Varna system and you'll learn a lot more. The yoga energy thing is related to Jesus through his 33 years and his 33 columns of spine. The sexual energy travels down his spine and back up. Yeah, Cowboy, I don't know. A, most of what you're saying doesn't make sense, but B, more likely, that's called shooting the target, and then that's called shooting the arrow, then drawing the target. You see this thing, 33, it matches up, therefore it must be. No, it's a coincidental thing that you are choosing to apply significance to that it probably doesn't have. Do you think the Anunnaki and misinterpretation of alien intervention played a big role in the stories of the Christian Bible in reference to all the miracles that were just misunderstood? No. See, so this is fascinating to me. You don't want to believe in the Bible or Christianity, which is fine. You have every right to not believe in it, but in order to replace it, you're just going with an even more outlandish belief in the Anunnaki. Now, there are the stories of ancient star dwellers and aliens, giants. These occur all throughout human culture of landing in certain areas of the world and creating societies there and influencing the societies that were already there. The Romans had most difficulty with Judea. They couldn't comprehend what was going on there. It was also a tension between a polytheistic and monotheistic society. All religions are used as instruments of power to rule. Yes, sometimes. And sometimes they're used as instruments to help people. I'm not going to be fully cynical about that. In Israel, there are two types of Jews, the European ethnic ones and the native land ones like the Palestinians, but they became Jews because of the arrival of European Jews. No, that's not true. The Jews that are in Israel who are Jewish and Middle Eastern were kicked out of Arab and Muslim and Middle Eastern countries after the 48 War. There were hundreds of thousands of Mizrahim Jews who were forced to flee to that area. There are also Sephards from North Africa who have also settled in that region as well. A lot of them were kicked out of Egypt, for instance. Yes, Fraz, you are my friend. Talk about Khazars. Khazars are the, if I'm correct, it's the one thing everybody wants to talk about because everybody's obsessed with the stupid Jewish issue. I'm sorry, but it is stupid because everybody is asking about this all the time. Why can't we talk about history that's not about Israel or Trump or anything? It always has to be about this stuff because this is spicy for you guys. Because you listen to a Nick Fuentes video and then you watch an hour documentary on the subject given by some skinhead and you think that you actually know something. You don't. The truth of the matter is that the Khazars were a group of people in Eastern Europe, the middle of Eastern Europe, and one of their kings supposedly adopted Judaism and became a Jew, and so a lot of the people in the region became Jews as well, and they built a small empire in that region. Let me see here. Yes, I'm aware of how old Jesus was supposedly when he died. Did you know that now we have something that everyone can view things at the same time? Live everyone in the world. Okay, I don't know what you're talking about. Talk about the Hittites. Oh, thank you. Finally, some history. The Hittites were a Indo-Aryan. Indo-Aryans come from basic cross through Turkey and settle in different areas of the Middle East and all the way to India. The Indo-Aryan peoples are from from the Caucasus, from that area between Europe and the Middle East and Asia, and they settle in. A lot of them settle in India. Some of them settle in Iran, Persia. Some of them, and the reason I use Iran is that Iran is based on Aryan, and that's what and that was a conclusion the British made. But the Indo-Aryan peoples, some of them settle and build an empire in what is now Turkey and Syria, and that empire is known as the Hittite Empire. They are extremely important because they bring the Iron Age to the Middle East and North Africa, which impacts the Egyptians and the rise of different Iron Age empires like the Assyrian and Neo-Babylonians. They bring the Iron Chariot. They bring a bunch of that stuff. So they're a pretty formidable force that shows up and a lot of people believe did not exist until the 19th century when evidence of their kingdoms actually finally came out. I forget how they were destroyed. I think the Assyrians destroyed them. They were attested to in the Bible. People wondered if that was even true, if there was any evidence to believe that, and eventually they were proven to actually have existed. But can we agree that non-secular regimes always lead to disaster? Not necessarily. Tito was secular, and he didn't lead to disaster. It's not fair. That's not fair either. Good to see you, Balisarius, as always. Howard Baskerville. No. Let me see here. I'm liking this channel overall. He's not making value judgments on the cultures. He's stating facts for the most part better than preachers on here. Thank you, High Voltage. I really appreciate that. It's very kind of you to say. The Shining, good book. Been watching you for a while. You're one of my favorite LGBTQ plus creators. Love what you do, bro. Much love and cheers. Well, that's hilarious, Lester. Thank you. Who cares? I mean, really, who cares? If I'm any one of those letters, or if I'm not, does it matter? Because what matters is the history. I've had people on this channel who are gay, or trans, or bi, and they want to learn something about the history of people who are like them, and I tell them history. For instance, Elagabalus, the famous non-binary emperor of Rome, who was biologically male, dressed as a woman, but had many homosexual liaisons. I talk about that stuff because you can't get away from the fact that there are people of that disposition all throughout history, or disposition may not even be the fair thing to say, but of that orientation all throughout human history, and you can't get away from it because, and it's part of history. So I'm going to talk about it, and it doesn't matter. Just like if I was gay, which shocker, I'm not. Surprise, surprise. I would talk about people who were straight in history, and that's most people in history. So that could be for a number of reasons. Obviously, social and cultural mores have allowed people to be more and more expressive with their sexuality in the last 60 years, but also it is probably true that the overwhelming majority of people in history were indeed heterosexual. Why does the idea of magic seem prevalent across the historical record of so many cultures? Supernatural. Trying to explain the way the world works without having a full detail of the scientific nature of the world around us leads a lot of people to think of things as magical. Look at the flood stories, which explains why rain happens. Those are all magical. And there's one in almost every culture. Let me see here. Let's talk about the Minoans. The Minoans were a Cretan civilization. Go watch my live stream lecture on the ancient Greeks. They were considered by many to be the first ancient Grecian civilization. I'm trying to remember when they pop up, 13th, 14th century BC. They're known for their pottery and things like that. They were traders, and obviously they're not on the mainland of Greece. The first major city-state civilization that emerged on mainland Greece are the Mycenaeans of Agamemnon fame. So there's a little bit about the Minoans for you guys. Do you know about the origins of secret societies in Europe, such as the Freemasonry, the Order, Golden Dawn, or the Rosicrucians? I've heard a little bit about them. The Freemasonry has always been supposedly tied to the Knights Templar, who were driven out by Philip VI of France in 1308, very famously. And a lot of people believe that they were driven underground and became the Freemasons, and that they actually came to the United States and the Americas before Columbus. Probably none of that's true. Don't know. I believe Freemasonry was founded in England, though. Who owned the African slave trade? The ports, the ships. There were companies that were involved in the slave trade that would own a lot of the ships. The port. Some of the earliest African slave trade was directly owned by African royalty. Is the new Tang dynasty a legitimate Chinese dynasty? I don't know, and I don't think so. Why do white people hate themselves so much and feel so guilty? Like, you don't have to be angry at other races, and why hate yourself? I am sad about all the hatred these days. I love you all. But we love you too, Cowboy, and there's no hatred here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. Let me see here. Any thoughts of why Africa has always not heavily progressed more than Europe over 1,000 years? Maybe because Europe was more Christian? Africa was extremely progressive. Under Mansa Musa, and Islam was extremely unifying to Western Africa, the Mali, Songhai, and Ghana empires that were really, really, really rich between 900 and 1500 AD. Africa's retardation compared to Europe is not an 1,000-year old story. It's something that has existed for much shorter of amount of time. It's really been only the last few centuries in which Africa has fallen behind Europe. The Industrial Revolution is a huge part of it. Colonization, oppression and imperialism, social Darwinism, paternalism and racism all have a part to play in how the Europeans mistreated and held back the African peoples. Kleptocracies, power vacuums, tribalism that emerged as a result of the end of the colonial period has created basically a dearth of economic support, and basically you're dealing with kleptocracies that are constantly going to seize the resources that you allocate towards them, so no amount of humanitarian aid seems to eventually do the trick. Innovation might be more of what it's needed. Africa never really experienced the Industrial Revolution. There is a growing myth in Iran that we are Aryans and European, which genetically we are only 10% Aryan, but linguistically we are like Indians and Pakistanis. I think it's internalized racism. Could be. Let me see. I don't think it's right to call him non-binary. Elagabalus was male biologically, but he believed that he wouldn't have known that term. They didn't use those terminologies. It's anachronistic. But by all accounts, he was very much between the genders, constantly. Cross-dresser would be a term we would use, but it was more of just part of who he was, who they were, to consider themselves to be a non-binary emperor. I would love you whether or not you're LGBT. I'm happy that you're my friend. Well, likewise for us. Rome was as LGBT as it gets, not to mention, no, the Greeks were more so. The Romans definitely dabbled, but the Greeks were like head over heels for it in many parts. It didn't matter if you were Spartan or Athenian. Howard Baskerville was not this Christian missionary from America who went to Iran for his missions. He fell in love and stayed. The Persian Constitutional Revolution, died for Iran, became a hero. Oh, that's fascinating. I didn't know about it. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's not because it was because you were as Christian. It was developed real fast. I mean, the Catholic Church blocked lots of development during the medieval and early Renaissance. It's not fully true. They blocked some, not as much as you think they did. Have you played Assassin's Creed? The symbolism and the relation to the Freemasons, Illuminati, all there. Yes, I've heard that. I haven't played it that much. I haven't, and I won't, and I wish it wasn't possible, but is it possible to identify someone by their photo on the internet using tools like reverse image search? Yes, usually. The Minoans weren't Grecian. Well, they were Cretan. I'd like to point out where they are locking up people for doing medical research because it disagreed with Galen. Galen was the OG standard. That happened. You also had Copernicus. Is it true that Europeans were in caves when the Great Pyramids were built? Yes. See? It's kind of a wheel of time sort of thing. There are extreme Christian areas in Africa, yes. No? Yes, there are, but Africa is not a majority Christian continent by any stretch of the imagination. Why was Portugal not more involved in continental North America? They were far more, because of the Treaty of Tordesillas, in which the Pope divided the East from the West, the Portuguese are far more interested in mercantile trade. They had already found effective routes to get to India and China and Japan, and so they mastered those in the 16th and 17th centuries. And they got Brazil. That's the only thing they could get. And they basically kept pushing back the Treaty of Tordesillas just to get more land because of Brazil's vast amounts of forestry. Crazy, you think Saudi Arabia officially banned slavery in 1962 and Maranisha in 1981, and they only did it because we pressured them to do so. That's true. But to be fair, those countries had not existed. Saudi Arabia did not exist until 1932. So only 30 years into its history, it banned slavery. The United States banned slavery 100 years into its history, 85 years, so yeah. How was England and later America able to avoid the economic hellscape like Africa and South America have? Part of it is by extracting resources from those areas. Part of it is the ingenuity of the industries. Necessity is the mother of invention. The British needed their textiles, and the best way to get your textiles is to obviously create machines that could give you your textiles a lot more quickly. This leads to the development of the Industrial Revolution, which started in the textile industry in Britain, the mechanical loom, the mechanical weaver, the spinning jenny, and that was eventually brought over to the United States by Samuel Slater. Basically, cold climates like New England and England itself needed proper amounts had a high demand for textiles. But this system of mercantile establishments, trade, and mutual exchange for profit was already well encountered in Britain, which had been a mercantile society since the 16th century, in competition with the French and the Spanish. And this is what Adam Smith was writing about in Wealth of Nations. I think there's a possibility that the Greek ancient gods were actually trapaloid giants that helped evolve society, the demigods. Well, that's a possibility that they were Anunnaki or Nephilim, but I just don't think so. Yes, Alexander the Great was indeed quite gay. Thank you for joining us, Belisarius. It was great to have you. Do you also enjoy prehistory? Yes, I do. That's true. The Portuguese did not have as large of a population or land mass as the Spanish did. What was the history of European Belgium? European Belgium was once called Flanders. It was a province separating the Holy Roman Empire and France. It's obviously conquered by Charlemagne and then divided. I think his second son takes it. Flanders later becomes part of the Netherlands, and the Netherlands is occupied by Spain. The Habsburg Spanish control it during the late medieval, early modern period, and eventually part of that land is divided. The southern part of the Netherlands is controlled by the Spanish for longer than the northern part of the Netherlands, and later on the Austrians will take control of that area because of the Habsburg connection between Spain and Austria at the time. Eventually that area will be controlled by all of the Netherlands during the golden age of the Dutch Republic in the 17th century. Then when Napoleon comes around, that land is eventually designated as a buffer zone between France and Germany, or the Holy Roman Empire, the areas of Germany, and becomes a permanently neutral country that's really not really established until 1815. And then they have a family that rules it, and Leopold is able to take the Belgian Congo as one of his colonies and horribly mistreat the people there until they eventually throw him out of power and give the colony to the Belgians themselves. But Belgium remains a neutral land, not to be ever attacked, as a buffer between France and Germany. Then the Germans attack it in 1914 at the start of the Great War, and that's what brings Great Britain into the conflict. So there's a little bit of a history of Belgium right there. And of course, they speak German and mainly French in Belgium. Wasn't Adolf secretly pro-LGBTQ? No, I don't think so. Have you heard them confirm that multiple realities exist stacked on top? No, they haven't confirmed that. What were the conditions that led to the collapse of the Tsar system in Russia and the rise of USSR? Um, inability, poor performance in the Great War, inability to actually properly address social and economic issues, lack of industrialization, economic opportunity, and a failure to develop political parties, economic ideas that were moderate and thoughtful. Almost all of the major Russian revolutionaries were socialists. It was just the Bolsheviks, the nastiest of the socialists, got it. Let me see here. What makes you so much interested in Russia specifically? I find Russia to be one of the most fascinating countries with the most fascinating histories because it's liminal. It's between the West and the East. When I see people talk about the Crusades, they like to talk about how bad the Christians were, but the Islamic side just as bad. Well, I mean, the Crusades start as the Christians respond to Muslim aggression symbol. So it's not like the Christians just decided to just pick on the Muslims for no reason. In fact, all of the lands that the Christians were trying to take back had been Christian lands under the Byzantine Empire that was later conquered by the Muslims. Spain would be an exception to that. So were the Spartans actually gay, war-crazy Greeks? I thought Athenians had the military to boast. Well, look at the Peloponnesian War. The Spartans got the bragging rights by defeating the Athenians and destroying the Athenian Golden Age and the Delian League. Kundalini energy in the chakra system is a spiritual mechanism all humans possess, written in Sanskrit thousands of years before Abrahamic religions poisoned the earth. Again, Sanskrit in India. When did Kundalini get to Israel? I would like to know when and how. Let me see here. The movie 300, the entire army were gay men fighting with their lovers. My buddy told me that's why they play a video game. And probably not fully true. Yeah. Why is Finland not considered part of Scandinavia? For a long time, Finland was controlled by the Russians, and it's not in the peninsula right next to Denmark. It's kind of sequestered away closer to the Baltic than the others. And yes, follow us on Instagram. Freshly, my other great moderators here, Rodolfo's here, so we've got all the wonderful moderators for the Friendly Neighborhood History channel in here. Did you know Scottish generals were in Peter the Great's army? Yes, I've heard about that. Thank you. Good to see you, White Widow. Why does Russia oppose the West from a historical point of view? Russia doesn't oppose the West. Russia opposes anyone who they would see as someone coming to take their land. They have had a fear of invasion since the Mongols decimated them under Batu Khan in 1242. Since then, the Russians have believed very much so in gaining as much land as they possibly can. The German concept of Lebensraum is actually predated by the Russian concept of we need this land or else we will be invaded. Napoleon's invasion and Barbarossa didn't help this. Those are both Western entities invading Russia. Russia has been fearful of the West for a long time. Not because it's the West, but because it's a potential invader. Thank you, Red. I really appreciate that. And yes, I am a nerd, but I'm very proud of that. The Sacred Band of Thebes, an elite military uniformation group composed 300 men into 150 male love pairs. That's not the same as the 300 who were at Thermopylae. What was that about the Delian League? The Delian League was an Athenian. It's called the Athenian Empire. It was a series of islands and city-states that owed their fealty to the Athenians that was destroyed when the Peloponnesian War ended and the Spartans were victorious in 405 BC. Yeah. And Russia feels that it always needs more land, always needs more space, always needs buffer zones to protect it. So Ukraine was a buffer zone that protected it. Poland was a buffer zone. Finland was a buffer zone that protected it. Kamchatka is a buffer zone that protects it from the United States in the east. They felt that they tried to take over Korea, Chosen, but the Japanese defeated them in 1905. Let me see here. Anyways, ever questions about history? Hello, Almar. Why did the UN not send Japan into Korea in the 50s? Probably because the US was occupying and using it as a base of its operation, and Japan not having a military was a huge goal of the United States after the war. It wasn't a league. It just what was not. It was an Athenian empire cloaked in a union. Yes, but it's called the Delian League. So if you want, it's like saying the Democratic Republic of North Korea, which is not democratic or republic. It's neither holy nor Roman nor an empire, to quote Voltaire. So it was neither Delian, no, it was neither a league nor Delian. It was just the Athenian Empire. There are two names for it. Yes. Well, I help people who come to the channel and ask questions about history and want to learn some lessons. So that's what we do here. The UN can't force anything, but the United States can, so which makes Harry very happy. Let me see here. I know you said the most overrated president was FDR, but I disagree. It's Reagan, in my opinion. I understand that, but Reagan has been trashed by historians for a long time, in big ways. I don't. FDR has not. There hasn't been a real critical analysis of FDR the way there has been of Woodrow Wilson, Reagan, or Lyndon Johnson. Please use AI to tell me a fact about witches. Um, the Salem witch. I don't need to use AI to tell you because I am the AI. But Andrew Jackson, another good example. But basically, DJ, the witches, the witch trials in Europe were far greater and far more expansive and lasted far longer than the Salem witch trials. That was a leftover remaining idea based on how based on these are Europeans, Englishmen, who are taking their values from England. So, um, what led to this? Well, the 666, Ronald Wilson Reagan, all three of his names have 6 letters in it, so 666 was something for Reagan. That was the Satanic Panic anyways, Rodolfo. What led to the stalemate in North-South division in the Korean War? Truman refused to let MacArthur. Basically, the way the Korean War works is, at first, the North Koreans push the South Koreans to the very tip of the peninsula, and then the Incheon landing is a huge surprise attack behind the lines by Douglas MacArthur. It's wildly successful. You also have the UN and the British and the French helping, but the Americans are the main ones fighting the war. America uses Japan as its base of operations. MacArthur pushes the North Koreans back, wants to take all of North Korea and reunify Korea under a democratic government supported by the United States. China, which has just become communist, and the People's Republic sends 2 million fighting men into North Korea. This pushes them back to the 38th parallel. I think it's 38th parallel, and that is the line of which it is now today, the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. And basically, MacArthur demands that Truman use nuclear weapons if possible, and that he go back in. Truman, not wanting to cause a war with Russia and the Soviet Union, who is supporting North Korea and now has the atomic weapons necessary to destroy the United States, punishes MacArthur for insubordination for continuing to his aggressive campaigns when he had told him to stop. Truman's popularity takes a huge hit because the war becomes unwinnable, and American presidents suffer when wars are unwinnable. Look at Iraq in 2008 with George W. Bush and the Republicans. But basically, Dwight Eisenhower is elected and ends the war. The Panmunjom stalemate basically divides Korea into the North and South countries that we know today. I don't get the obsession with Wilson. Why Wilson, out of all people? I don't know. Ask everybody else on this channel. I don't really care about Woodrow Wilson. Yes. MacArthur was right. A lot of people think that. Yeah, but Woodrow Wilson deserves the hate he receives because that guy, I don't care if he deserves. I really don't care about Woodrow Wilson. I have less interest in Woodrow Wilson than Donald Trump does in Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah. Well, it's fine because America has guaranteed the destruction of its soft power due to the Trump administration exercising bullying power. And let me remind everybody, Harry is jealous because Poland is about to become more economically dominant in Europe than Great Britain. That's a fact. It's a well-established fact. He can't stop it. It seems inexorable. But that inevitability is obviously frustrating him, so he has to take sucker punches at the American system and the American president. It would be any American president, by the way. It doesn't just have to be the orange one he hates so much. So, let me see. Can someone ban Harry? No, I'm not going to ban Harry. Nathan, you're from the UK? Well, it's good to have somebody from the UK who's not crazy. If Greece united, would it have survived the Persians and the Ottomans? Well, it survived. The Ottomans destroyed the Byzantine Empire, which had control of Greece, so there's nothing you can do there, Henry. But but Greece united against the Persians obviously destroyed them. Look at Alexander. The phalanx was far superior to the immortals of Xerxes' army. Let me see here. Yes, let me see. Hi, BMX. Since as vice president of part of Denmark, when the Danish government made it clear that they weren't welcome, the Greenland government made it clear he wasn't welcome. I don't really care. Why do you care so much? Why are you obsessed with someone who is not even your head of state? Shouldn't I be the one that's obsessed? And I really don't care. I just find it strange how people... This is the same thing with the Jewish issue. When it comes to Donald Trump, there's only one group of people who cares more about him than his most rabid of supporters. People who hate him. Negative cultic energy is more off-putting than positive cultic energy. Both are very off-putting. But negative cultic energy where it's like, oh, we obsess in hating this individual no matter what. And we're going to bring it up 8 billion times in a live stream that has nothing to do with him. That is more important to us than anything else in this world, apparently. That is more off-putting than the people who wear the red hats and just chant his slogans over and over again, even when he seemingly contradicts himself. So, the fact that America claims to be the home of democracy and self-determination, the rule of international law, and then threatens a sovereign country which is an ally. Actually, Harry, by your twisted British standards, you should love Donald Trump because Trump is making Britain look good again. So if the United States loses its power and its standing, Britain will emerge as one of the more stronger forces in the world. So actually, you should be thankful to him because he's finally bringing Britain back to its period of superiority by your views on the issue. So by your logic, Trump's actually doing the British a favor, and you love the British, so therefore you should be grateful for Donald Trump. So that must be quite fascinating. But you can't see that because you're so obsessed with narratives that The Guardian tells you. Let me see. And thank you, Maria. This is my smoking jacket. I hope you enjoy it. We were talking about regular history, but then my moderators decided to just start ranting about nonsense. Do you know anything about Australian Aboriginals watercraft? Not sure. Not a huge amount. Weren't they similar to canoes? Don't you care if the USA president has been to Epstein Island? He hasn't. And I mean, it would be horrible if he had been. But I mean, I'm kind of over it. So many people have been over it. That's the whole point of the Epstein thing. It was to make people get tired of it and then move on with their lives, and therefore not to care when you actually find out the truth. With military invasion and occupation, no, you're American, you wouldn't care. You've got to understand it from a European perspective. Your president threatened military invasion and occupation of a European country for no reason. How is it nonsense? It's nonsense because I don't really care. Nobody else really cares. I'm an American, and I should be far more worried about this, but I'm ambivalent about it. I have my own personal perspectives on the matter, and I'm not going to share them. But you make it an obsession of yours to obsess about a American leader who has no influence over your country, at least directly. You're more obsessed with him who's not your head of state than I am with him as my head of state. Don't you think that's kind of strange? And then further, by destabilizing America's position in the world, which is what you argue he does, it makes the British look better. It gives the British more prestige. It gives the British back some of their control over European affairs. I mean, that's what Carney's trying to do in Canada. That's what Starmer's trying to do, kind of be an opposition bloc to Trump. That should increase British prestige, which is something you should love, but you don't love it. Love that it's happening, but maybe you love it, but you don't love the way it's happening. But isn't that should make you grateful because you're such an Anglophile? You're such a nationalist about this. But then at the same time, you fail to realize that but you're so obsessed with hating the man that you have to hate him no matter what he does, even if it's actually indirectly helping your country. Billions in trade, military cooperation, extreme. Well, yeah, that's because the United States controls Great Britain. We know that, but yes. So yeah. And what I mean is that President Trump does not make British laws. That's what I mean. His political crony, Nigel Farage, who looks to become the next prime minister, and you're going to tell me he has no power. I never said he doesn't have power. I said he has no direct legislative power over the British. And indeed, he doesn't. And he's not helped. I don't know. My whole point is, Stephen, it's not about Trump helping the UK or not. I really don't care about Donald Trump. I'm a historian taking questions about history, but my moderators don't remember that. The problem is that people are so obsessed with hating Donald Trump that covers and coats everything they see, no matter what. So they have to buy narratives, most of which are false, some of which are true, and just roll with it no matter what, even when it's been proven to be wrong. So, yeah, a lot of people dislike Starmer. And Harry doesn't like to talk about Starmer because he knows he'll be out of power soon, and it's probably going to be Nigel Farage who's in charge of Great Britain, which is a scary thought to a lot of people. No history more recent than Vietnam War. Well, I've talked about recent history is a contemporary thing. It's an ongoing process, and I talk about it into the modern era only because it matters, and I'll talk about politics only in the sense of what do I see historically. So Donald Trump as a historical phenomenon is we've never seen anything like this. This is the worst thing we've ever seen. No, it's not. I'm sorry. It's just not. I know better. Let's talk about the Concert of Vienna. You mean the Concert of Power that Clemens von Metternich organized in 1814-15 to reorganize the European structure, creating a balance of power that would last for a century? That Concert of Vienna? Why don't you change moderators? Because Harry does a good job in bringing up information that I think is useful and interesting for the channel. He helps the channel a great deal. He's extremely on top of things. Nigel Farage has a plan to destroy this country as the reason I don't like him, but you know. See, this is what happens when you only read one source. This is like people who watch Fox News and then say liberals are destroying America. They don't know what that means. They just know that it sounds scary, so it will be good red meat for their side. When you just buy the red meat that your side throws out at you all the time, that's where you get these perspectives from. And yes, Keir Starmer probably will be out of power quite soon because he's governing as a conservative in a socialist party. This is the moving the target issue. Harry is a labor socialist. So because he's a labor socialist, if somebody is doing something bad, they're acting like a Tory. You don't see how you've bought into this political narrative and you're not actually looking beyond the political narratives. Let me see here. We all love Harry. The obsession of hated Trump has made him more powerful, and he has dominated every facet of society because of it. And he will also be remembered if his opposition to act normal his time would. Yes, the people who have been obsessed with Donald Trump have given him more power than he could possibly imagine. He won't go away. He could have been gone by now if he had won in 2020. Who knows? I mean, I don't particularly buy the nonsensical narrative about the election being stolen. But let's say it was. If they had allowed him to win the election, then boom, he's gone now. That's kind of funny to me. Now he's back, and he's more powerful than ever in many ways because he's seen himself as a victim, and a lot of his followers see him as a victim persecuted by the left, and that rode him to the win. I was amazed when I found out he'd been convicted of his 34 felonies. I'm like, oh, it's over. And then I go on, and then I read his website collapsed. His website crashed because people were going on it to donate. That's the power that people with what they call Trump derangement syndrome give people like Trump. It's the same thing with Hitler. You put him away, you make him a political victim, and then all of a sudden he emerges more powerful than ever before, and it's more terrifying than it was before. And no, I did not call Trump Hitler. I'm drawing a historical parallel because I'm a historian. That doesn't mean that Trump is Hitler. I think I have a very legit reason right to hit him, but I don't have Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah, I understand why you have look at Photo Row, look at what he did there. Yes, I complete that. I understand that. Yes. Oh, did you see Elon Musk's tweet about Woodrow Wilson? He was bashing him as a bad person. Well, Wilson created the Federal Reserve, and Musk is a libertarian, so I understand why he hates that. No, he is governing as a Tory. He doesn't want to do tax rises. He tried to limit the welfare state. Yes, and that is not why people hate him, by the way. That isn't why people hate him, by the way. Injustice is at the root of the destruction of every great empire. America is a powerful empire. Exactly. And corruption is a huge part of it, too. And injustice is part of every human empire. You are the most beautiful person in the world. Thanks. Harry is a keyboard warrior that spends time on Reddit. He is the baddest man alive. Welfare state should only be for people who have paid into the system. No foreigners should be receiving anything. So, yes, there we go. Before he even took office, is a bad posture by his opposition because it played the game. Yes, exactly, Nathan. I agree. An interesting thing we have seen from recent presidents is using drones to bomb countries that we are not in an active war or conflict with. What was the history of attacks outside of war before Obama? You have Reagan's strike on Muammar Gaddafi as an example of this. Military operations and strikes were quite common in American history. That's why the War Powers Resolution was made. It wasn't made until the 1970s. Because presidents would act with military. I mean, Nixon bombed the Gulf of Tonkin incident allowed Johnson to ramp up Vietnamese involvement. Nixon bombed these areas without authorization. That's why we got the War Powers Resolution. President Obama, believe it or not, despite Nobel Peace Prize winner Barack Obama, this is one of the ironies of history, killed 100,000 people through military intervention in the Middle East. I mean, and that's no criticism. That's not necessarily criticism. It's just one of the great ironies. Nobody will remember that historically, but I will. And it's quite fascinating. He was the drone striker. He was the deporter in chief. In fact, many of the things that his successor has been criticized for were things he did and was praised for. This isn't a criticism of him at all. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that it happened. Who killed JFK? I am beyond the belief that Lee Harvey Oswald did. I don't think there's enough evidence to say that Oswald acted alone. I don't think Oswald would have had the chance to actually get off those shots and kill him. I think it's probably someone else, someone in high in power who wanted power, but also wanted to continue the military-industrial complex's domination of the Cold War corporate scene. Was the history of Canada becoming the 51st state? Would it ever happen? Would it be beneficial or evil? Again, another thing where it's like Trump says it and we all pretend this is the most horrible thing, but annexing Canada has been an idea Americans have had for a long time. Freeing Canada from the British Empire was a huge part of the Revolutionary War effort. It reoccurs in the War of 1812. It doesn't go anywhere over time because America lost the War of 1812. And so America has always been fascinated with getting more land. I mean, British Columbia was settled by the Americans partially, and there was this back and forth. You had the 54-40 fight. Would you want to get to the 54th parallel, the 40th parallel, or fight a war with Britain to get control of Canada or large sections of Canada, including British Columbia, where the Americans had been settling for a long time, as well as Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. So, the truth of the matter is, Americans have wanted Canada, or at least wanted to use Canada, for a very long time. People hate him for a multitude of reasons. Yeah, not even close in levels of despotism. Playing the victim seems extremely successful in the historical record. Yes, true. Yeah. Let me see here. Harry hasn't muted anyone, Otter. Be nice. What do you think of Russia? I think it's the most fascinating country in the world. And I wouldn't be a Russian historian if I did not think it was most fascinating. But I love all the other countries, like the Spanish, which you see the galleons in the background. That's the background, by the way. Of course, I'm wearing a British smoking jacket, and I'm an American. I love the history of all three of those countries. Just to point out, the government recently removed automatic welfare for asylum seekers. Yes, probably too little too late. A lot of people in Britain are angry about the asylum seekers. U.S. citizen, Anwar al-Awlaki. Yes, I remember that. And just to point out, some people can't contribute to, so this whole idea you should only have access to welfare state to contribute is nonsense. Yes, I agree. Did you know about how nutmeg was the reason why Marathon was sold to England? Manhattan was sold. Oh, yes, the English bought it from the Dutch. I don't know a huge amount about how nutmeg was involved, but yes. What do you think of this statement, America never had a culture? What about this one? America once had a culture, but then the melting pot idea was promoted and got ruined. America has always had a culture, and the culture is settlement and sharing culture. America's culture is that it has no culture. Let me see here. Is annexing North America a great strategy to combat countries like Russia or China? Could be, but it's foolhardy, and the Canadians don't want it. Is the modern world divided into the West and the East, and Russia between? Where does India fit in the die? India is squarely in the East, but it's not quite Eastern in this. It's Oriental wealth, riches, and spices and resources have been coveted by the Europeans since the Middle Ages, and India was the main reason that Columbus went west. It was a competition with the Portuguese. Yeah, Russia is all attrition. Yes, it has its own standards, but the Americans were willing to annex it by force. Now they're willing to annex it by peace. So there's that too. Annexing by force is called conquering. So is there any similarities in the migration period in Europe and today's mass migration? No, Europe has never seen mass migration like it has today, and that's why there's so many problems. You can't annex Canada. You can buy it out, perhaps. Yeah, that's what the Americans under Trump want to do. Foolhardy, possibly, but new? No. Americans have always seen themselves as an expansive force. Why is Trump targeting immigrants in the U.S.? This was never done before. Yeah, are you being sarcastic? I hope you're being sarcastic, because immigrants being targeted in the United States is the story of American Immigration 101. Migration of the 8th century in Europe. Are you talking about Islam conquering, the Muslims conquering Spain? Nothing like this. This is peaceful migration of asylum seekers and refugees going to European countries and trying to find a new life for themselves. Yeah. Thank you. High voltage, take care. Let me see here. Well, anyways, let's see, we're gone 71 minutes. I said I would go 120, but let's see. Does anyone have any other questions? If you're just joining us, welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, our Q&A, live stream Q&A, where you can ask me anything you'd like about history and social studies. Obama deported more people than any other president in the history of the United States. Am I correct? Yes. Trump is on pace to pass him up, though, this time. I know, but I give him 86,000 seconds timeout, so I'm very happy. Yes. Why did America give up the Philippines? They probably should have given it up, if you want to look at it from a moral perspective, Henry, after the Spanish-American War. But the paternalistic idea that the Filipinos were not good enough to govern themselves led to the Philippine-American War, something nobody talks about. Emilio Aguinaldo fighting against the Americans. William Howard Taft, the future president and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the only man to serve in both positions. Only president to swear in a future president. He swore in Calvin Coolidge in 1925. He governed the Philippines while the United States fought the war, and they defeated them, and they took over the Philippines, and a lot of people were killed. John Blackjack Pershing, probably the most famous general in American history who was not involved in the last World War, which I consider to be World War III. I believe the 7 Years' War is the First World War, by the way, and then the Great War is World War II, and the Nazis, World War III. But to answer your question, these are good questions. I'm going to answer these as soon as I can. But basically, after the last World War, the United States felt that the Filipinos had suffered enough. They were already kind of fast tracking a way to independent rule for the Filipinos. And they also believed that the Philippines, in a show of good faith, America decolonized, hoping that pushing decolonization would defang the argument from the Soviets that they were an imperial power that was oppressing people. They wanted to have a moral high ground in the Cold War. Do you think communism is the best or not? No. I think communism is far from the best. I think it's idealistically has a lot of good things that people would like, but I don't think that it delivers on any of it. Do you think racism will end by 2027? Yes, racism will end tomorrow. There are no former Muslim countries that became Christian in the history of the world. No former Muslim countries that became Christian. That's an interesting thought. Spain, you could argue. But Spain was already heavily Christian. At least the European Spanish were. Why did the U.S. give up Panama? Jimmy Carter, once again, making a show of beneficence, wanted to show that the United States sold the Panama Canal to the Panamanians for $1 and gave it back to them at the end of the century. Carter had Carter changed foreign policy for the United States in a way that was unprecedented. Carter had this as a Sunday school teacher, minister, good old Southern boy. Carter believed that basically if you act with Christian charity, kindness, and respect, other people will follow that example. And this is kind of described neoliberal foreign policy. Is one of the reasons Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize, by the way. We're talking about that. That if you lead by example, and we see this with Democratic presidents, especially since Carter. Carter gives up the Panama Canal. Carter has Israel give up the Sinai to get peace with Anwar Sadat, who's killed for that, by the way. Clinton passes legislation saying the United States will not respond to a first strike as a show of good faith to the Russians after the end of the Cold War. Then after him, you have President Obama, who kind of goes with the same thing, where it's if you set a good example of how to behave, other countries will follow that. It's a very different model than the peace through strength, Theodore Roosevelt, Reagan, speak softly and carry a big stick narrative, where it's basically threaten people and you'll get your way eventually. Or at least be willing to go to war if you have to, and use your military might as a way to basically cow people into submission. It's a different foreign policy idea. Lebanon and Turkey were previously Christian. Yes, the Byzantines controlled them, and the Muslims conquered them. Same with the Palestine. What is stopping Putin from invading Europe? Is Poland holding it down? He knows that if he invades Poland, it's going to be too much of a world war recollection. He doesn't think the Chinese will actually join a world war with him directly, unless he feels that if he can be the victim, then the Chinese might help him in a world war. But if he's just going to be wildly aggressive in Eastern Europe, he's going to get Britain, France, and eventually the United States to attack, and then he's going to have to deal with, and he's not going to get the backup from China that he thinks. Why didn't it just annex it as a colony? Well, the United States created Panama through Theodore Roosevelt's invasion. The United States is not as acquisitive in imperial matters as the British. When did the Americas change from being anti-imperialist to an empire? It's a hegemonic empire, and really, I would say the end of the Cold War. The United States was already setting up the groundwork for that in the First World War, or what you call the First World War. But it really isn't until after the last World War that the United States really kind of says, okay, we're the ones who make all the decisions. Do you think there will be another Israel and Iran war? You keep asking me that. I don't think so. I think the more this year goes on, the more likely that's to hold up for a while. And I think I think Iran is also losing a lot of its positioning and standing in the Middle Eastern world as this goes on. UK immigration comes from negotiations with corrupt Commonwealth countries in order to continue siphoning sources from those countries and in return take in and educate natives from said countries. Okay. Good to have you, Anaksa. It's been a while. But if America kept the Philippines, Japan would have acted much differently. No. The Philippines were part of the United States when Japan attacked them. If the United States had not kept them, it might have been different. Did General McCarthy take part in dispersing World War I veterans at a protest in D.C.? McCarthy? You think General MacArthur, Douglas MacArthur? Yes, I believe he did. Spain returns to Christianity through violence. The Reconquista. That's true. There were crusades in Spain. The reason I talk about history here is because this channel is about history, not because it's not about It's the only thing I'm interested in, but it is one of my most favorite topics. And I have plenty of topics I'm interested in that I don't talk about. I'll hint at it once in a while. But I mean, of course, as a historian, I love the other social sciences, economics, politics, religion. These things are quite fascinating to me. And philosophy. But it doesn't mean that I've talked about this stuff, but it doesn't mean that that's the primary focus of this channel. Ireland rebelled in 1916 in the middle of a world war, so we weren't really that bothered about it, and we still own 6 Irish counties in Ireland. See, that kind of information is quite fascinating, which are owned by the UK, administered by the UK, developed country, and are under UK sovereignty. Do you think there's any validity to the claims that the mobster Stem Giancana was behind RFK assassination? Possibly. I don't think so. Sirhan, I think, acted alone. JFK is much more likely to the mafia be involved. How do you judge Theodore Roosevelt? One of the best presidents in American history. Let me see here. I think Iran is waiting for America to start ground operations in Venezuela. Could be. I asked that because you never really answered it, and I was really worried about it, but now I am less worried, so thank you. Answered what? Sorry, what did I not answer? What actually is Putin's goal? I don't really see what this end does. This must be Russian enclaves in many other countries, corner USSR. I think he's in too deep, and I think he has tunnel vision. And I think he knows that if he loses, he's probably going to lose power, but if he stops, he might lose power too. He's gambling. Does Ukraine deserve to be invaded by Russia, and does Russia have valid reasons for their campaign? No. There are regions in eastern Ukraine that would be more sympathetic to the Russian regimes, but that's the case in all throughout the world. There are parts of eastern Oregon that want to join Idaho. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, and those are just states, let alone countries. I mean, there was a deal on the table. Zelensky was interested in it. Putin didn't. And I thought the war was going to end in April, and I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. I think it's going to be an ongoing thing, and it might simmer down. But that war has technically been going on since 2014. Why did he take the gamble, though? He thought that everybody was weak enough that he could overwhelm the Ukrainians and get a lot of land. He probably wanted to connect Crimea to the rest of those lands, Donetsk and the Donbass, which has a lot of oil in it. The Russian economy was teetering on collapse, and Putin fell victim to the lie that war is good for the economy. War is good for parts of the economy. And Ryan, great to have you here. Long time. It is a sunken cost fallacy. You said, Ed, why do I keep asking about Iran-Israel war? I said you never answered it, but you finally answered it no. But oh, yes. So yeah, I don't think I'm less worried about it. I would always say I don't know. What are we talking about this Friday? Any questions? Good. Well, we're doing a lot longer special because we missed yesterday, but just regular questions. It's great to have you here, Ryan. And Ryan, on Substack now, I know you've been asking about this for a long time. You can read my master's thesis on the Great Game between Russia and Great Britain. You can read my writing on my Substack. Surya is asking, the American people were not native to that land. However, many persons think they are native. Would you please tell the history of yours? American land natives people are killed by the British, true or not? A lot of them were, but the French and the Spanish killed a lot. The natives killed a lot of Europeans, and the natives killed a lot of each other. I'm not that's not a whataboutism. I'm just telling you the reality. War costs countries long-term prosperity. Yes, war is not as good for the economy as people think. It's good for sections of it. I want to see Nuremberg. It's going to be fascinating. Is Ukraine corrupt and it's justified somewhat, or is he going from Georgia and so on? It's Georgia and so on. I don't think Putin cares if something is corrupt or not. He's plenty corrupt himself. His government's plenty corrupt himself. But he's tried to make this narrative to the West in order to... It's similar to how a lot of the PR run by Middle Eastern radical Islamic terrorist groups was meant to shame the West for its behavior. He's trying to do the same thing by saying, look at how corrupt Zelensky is. Look at how he's targeting the Christian church. Don't you in the West care? Aren't you Christians? He's trying to appeal to the West to try to get them to lose their spine in defending, defending the Ukrainians and get them to see. It's a form of propaganda and manipulation to get the Westerners, particularly the United States, to see to be ambivalent enough to not get involved. And basically say, well, Putin's not really that much worse than Zelensky. They're kind of just the same. No, by all metrics of dictatorship, by all metrics of historical understanding, Zelensky may be corrupt. The government of Ukraine may be corrupt. It may be repressive on the church, but it is far less corrupt than that of Putin. It is far less dictatorial than that of Putin. And the Russians cannot brag about churches. Their church attendance is the lowest in all of Europe, even lower than the French, which is saying something. And it's a lie, it's a Potemkin village, it's a manipulation, and people like Tucker Carlson are not critical enough to actually realize that he's being played. Of course, people who are on the right are worried about Christian safety, but they're not worried about the safety of Christians in Russia. They don't talk about that. They talk about the Christian safety in Ukraine because they want to be edgy and they want to push a narrative that's counter to the mainstream, so that people will abandon any hope of wanting to help Ukraine. So that's there. You got a political analysis for me for free based off of a geopolitical situation that we're in, and usually I charge for those. But yeah. The United States is an amalgamation, Surya, of different peoples who settled and colonized this area over the centuries. Where do you find my master's thesis? On the Substack. You can go there, follow my Substack, Friendly History, and you can read my articles, and there is a link to my Google Doc version of my master's thesis. Bodhisattva is a form of Buddhism, Chuckle. Yeah, how do you get a substance? Oh, what happened? Oh, my lighting died. Oh, that's weird. Let's see here. Lighting on. That makes it a little bit better, though. And then we're going to move this over here. So I don't know why. My light in the back is connected to my laptop, and my laptop died. So that's why that light went out. But anyways, now we've got a nice little campfire vibe going. Let me see here. The Substack is in the link. It's tagged below. How long before Trump decides to invade Venezuela and take people's mind off the Epstein files? I don't know. I mean, what goes through that man's head is anyone's guess. I don't think Trump is that concerned about the Epstein files. His supporters have been his supporters for as long as he's been around. I think he cares about his supporters, about being supported. Let me see here. Ukraine keeps making... Okay. Oh, Hank's here, and Bill was here earlier. Fascinating. So we just are missing Dale and Boomhauer. Is there any info on what Putin did well in the KGB? I can never find any. No, and that should be scary. How do you know explaining the golden age in the 1950s? It's this idealization of American culture where America was decently prosperous. People were you typically had the man working and able to support a family. You had a wife and you had children. The children went to school. It's kind of this American dreamland. It's obviously not false, but it only tells part of the story. You have McCarthyism. You have a Red Scare. You have people losing their livelihood because they were once communists and things like that. You also have segregation. You have a lot of problems. You have a total social injustices all over the place. It's not as peachy clean as people like to think about it, but you got a good president in Eisenhower. You have an America that's prosperous and wealthy, but you also have this internal existential fear of the A-bomb and things like that. You have children ducking under desks during air raid drills, thinking that will save them from a nuclear Armageddon. So it's an idealization. There is no such thing as the good old days. Any historian can tell you that. Would it be beneficial for European countries to join the Unionist states? No, just because of the separation and the economic issues and the cultural issues. It would be such a slap in the face to me as a historian if that were to happen, because of the rich historical nature of those countries in Europe. Canada might be the best when it comes to compared to all the other European states, but that's not going to happen. Let me see. I know Simon tonight, unfortunately, but we hope he's well. Russia is power. Furrows are all smoke and mirrors. There's Russia being power. That's a great question, Matt. That might be the greatest question in Russian history, because it vacillates between smoke. Russia will always represent strength, but will it represent it accurately, or will it be a misrepresentation of what is actually happening? Let me see here. Do you feel that Trump is suing the BBC because they didn't include him in the Last Traders episode? Great question, but no. Trump was going to sue the BBC. They apologized. They misrepresented January 6th footage of him. How does one get a Substack access? I think you can join for free, and if you join for free, you get that, and then you can subscribe and become a member. And I think there's certain articles that I have listed there, but the Substack link is there, Friendly History. I think you can join for free and read the article for free. I hope you can. I'll have to change it if not, because I've been wanting you to be able to read the article for a long time. So let me see here. How is racial integration the point of bayonet fair and just? Forcing people to get along is not necessarily fair and just, but segregation itself is not fair and just. In New Zealand, youths are taking all the old air raid sirens and mounting them to their cars for loudness wars. Oh, great, another muffler. pimp a muffler out. If war isn't conducive to the economy, how do you explain the 1950s golden age? That's what I meant. Oh, well, but war is conducive. War can be conducive to certain industries, but American industries were fettered during the Great War, or the last World War, World War III, and after that, there was a deregulation of the economy in a massive way that led to production. I mean, yes, there were big military contracts handed out to huge players, but there was also consumer goods and availability from companies that were producing military equipment, but also just had the manpower from all these men coming back from the service and had the wherewithal and had the funds to do it. And so it's not necessarily the military making America rich in the 1950s. That's part of it, but it's not the full story. You can have a vibrant, prosperous economy, and its war wasn't happening. Korea happens at the beginning of the 50s, but throughout the decade, America is pretty peaceful. At least ostensibly. You are building up because of the Cold War, but yeah. Were you surprised when Mondami won? No, and no one should have been surprised by Mondami winning. He's charming, good-looking, charismatic, and he makes a lot of sense in the sense that he appeals to what people are struggling with. Regardless of what you think of politics, Mondami winning shouldn't be surprising to you at all. And if you looked at the polls before, you shouldn't be surprised. 50 passed and he won. Let me see here. Why is the Korean War not talked about like others? Because it's the forgotten war because it's between these two big wars. One America wins and one America loses, Vietnam and the last World War. But it's not as culturally earth-shaking. It's part of the Cold War, but it's actually a noble effort by the United States. I would argue that the war is not a failure, like a lot of Americans kind of have a cynical view about the Korean War. No, it kept Korea from becoming communist, which was the goal. So it did achieve this goal. The communists actually failed to reunify the peninsula under communism, which is why the North invaded in the first place. Hello, Otak. Great to see you as always. I am from India. I have as long a doubt as the American government corrupt presidents. You're going to complain about corrupt governments? Is Modi the most pure politician? I'm sorry. I love India. I love Indian history. Watch my video, Surya, on the Varna system. But Indians can be blind to their own history, as any people can. Let me see here. Korea was overstated by World War II and Vietnam and didn't get much coverage at the time. Yes, but it should have. I agree. And it's good to see you, Julianne. Decatur's, but my country, right or wrong quote, was it good for America or just a sign of the times? I don't know what you're referring to, Mule Skinner. How is racial integration at the point of... Oh, I already answered that. No, it's because you realize you're wrong about the... What is happening between Harry and Hassan? They're going at it again. For God's sakes. In pathetic fallacy, if the United States are an eagle and China is a panda, what is the animal that best represents Japan? I'm not sure. If the United States are an eagle, China is a panda. I always think of Japan as some sort of animal that is stronger than it looks. Because Japan is a series of islands, and a lot of people have felt that they could take advantage of Japan throughout its history, and Japan always finds a way to resist them, be it the Chinese are the main ones who have felt this wrath. Look at Kublai Khan and the typhoons. The Europeans try to bully Japan in the 16th century, 17th century. It gets nowhere. Watch my video on Japanese Christianity for more. Hars, could you put the video on the Varna system and Japanese Christianity in the chat? The link's there. You guys can go and watch that when you're done with this. And I think, of course, the United States, the most recent example is the Japanese are overlooked at the end of the Great War, and they become an industrial superpower. They've already destroyed the Russians during the Russo-Japanese War. Because they're overlooked, they become extraordinarily aggressive and militant, and that leads them to Mudkin, it leads them to the Marco Polo Bridge incident, it leads them to invading China, and eventually lead to Pearl Harbor. Let me see. But Mondani wants to seize the means of production. Where have we heard that before? Well, he's a socialist. Of course he's going to want to seize the means of... I'm not saying that it works. I'm saying that's what he wants to do. I'm saying he's appealing to things people are worried about because authority is a huge issue in America's biggest city. Thoughts on the Ottomans. Fascinating empire. Really, really interesting how they started off as this foreign invader to the Europeans, and then by the time they were a weaker empire, the Europeans just kind of saw them as their weaker little brother. That's the way the Russians and the Austria-Hungarians saw them by the turn of the century. Ottoman history is fascinating. You've got some of the most powerful rulers ever: Mehmed the Conqueror, Suleiman the Magnificent, Murad the First. These guys did a lot and got a lot done and built a huge empire and threatened the very survival of Christian Europe. So, can you see a future where China fails? It's possible. Xi falling would be a huge part to that. Komodo dragon. I don't know what you're asking about. History is indeed amazing, Matt. I so agree with you. Shuriken, great to see you. Glad you could join us. Honey badger for Japan. Ah, interesting. My battery died, but now I am back. I'm so glad that you're back. What about you, the Moors? Do you know about them? The Moors are the Muslims who settled in Spain and eventually were driven out in 1492, and eventually all Muslims were exiled. They were defeated by Ferdinand and Isabella and lost the Emirate of Granada. History is such a vast and interesting subject, and you really can apply what people have done in the past to your own life as well. The world as a whole. Any history recommendations to read up on? Read John Kelly's book Never Surrender, because it tells about Britain's decision to stay in the war, and it could be extremely important for understanding the Russia-Ukraine crisis, Alexander. Are you from North Ireland? No, Harry is full-on English, I think. Let me see here. In Nordic socialism, you don't see the means of production, you just give welfare. It's welfare with a lot of economic freedom and a lot of taxes. It was the embargo the U.S. implanted on Japan that led to the Pearl Harbor attack. Yes, it was. The embargo because of Japan's alliances with the Germans and the Italians. My favorite inscription on the tombstone is, I told you I was ill. What's yours? That's a funny one. I don't know. That's all, folks. Mel Blanc. Porky Pig does That's all, folks, on his tombstone. In your mind, would you say the slave trade was a mainstay for those back then? Yes, it wasn't the slave trade that was unique. It was getting rid of the slave trade that was unique. What was also unique was the Europeans using their technology. I've talked about this before on the channel. Technology is really what allows the Europeans to colonize, oppress, and imperialize more than other people had been doing before. Because before they showed up, the Aztecs were doing it a heck of a lot to the other Indians around them. Why is USA viewed as a highly racist country when statistics say it is actually one of the most racially accepting countries, especially when compared to Germany, Scandinavia, and Japan? Because the United States is judged on its own history and is known for certain things like the Civil War, where you have hundreds of thousands dying because of racial issues. And so the United States struggles with it, and the very fact that the United States is historically biracial is now multiracial. It's biracial, white and black, and now is multiracial with Hispanics and Asians. Is the fact that it's a multiracial country, a multicultural country, means it has a high standard to reach when you consider racial harmony. Japan doesn't have to reach that standard because Japan is homogeneous, far more so. Let's see. Also, they believe it should be top tier Asians to rule Asia, which led to their imperialism. Yes, there's a lot of imperialism and racism in Japan, China, and Korea. Yep, I do indeed know my stuff. America versus Tripoli pirates, the Barbary Coast pirates, the first war Americans ever fought. Well, at least the first military conflict. Friendly history. Does the UK still own part of Ireland? Yes, Ulster. Most of Ulster, at least. Say the Civil War was about slavery is like saying Iraq was about WMD. No, the Civil War is about slavery. And all the other arguments that, oh, it was the lost cause, it was states' rights, it was preserving their way of life, all of it is because of slavery. If Lincoln hadn't been elected, they wouldn't have seceded. They thought Lincoln was coming to take away their slaves. They were wrong. Lincoln didn't really believe that, but that's what they thought. Did you read the book, The Art of War? I've actually never read it. I should, though. I really, really should. Friendly Nation, can you also explain to Hassan that Northern Ireland is a devolved government? No, I would just like someone to tell you you're wrong because you don't seem to take it from me. Well, that's fair. Hassan doesn't like being corrected, but I'm going to correct him here. And I love Hassan. Hassan's a longtime Friendly Neighbor historian, and you can be too if you're just joining us, if you like and subscribe. Basically, the British have given kind of a salutary neglect to Northern Ireland and allowed it to govern itself, as they have to Scotland, but it is still technically part of the United Kingdom. Ireland, the Isle of Man, the Isle of Wight, Scotland, Wales, and England. But yeah, and Ulster, the majority of it is owned by the British still. Belfast is obviously the largest city. Northern Ireland is historically more Protestant, and because of that has less of a tie to the sovereign part of the country, which achieved its independence in 1922. Oh, GMAT, great question. Define history. History is the study of the human condition in certain circumstances and events that took place in the past. And history is about ideas. Why so many people believe moon landing was fake? I don't know. I think a lot of people just don't want to believe that the impossible is possible. As a Canadian, I think Mark Carney is doing just fine. I don't know how Pure Pro would have done. Not surprised Canada voted Liberal. Yeah, they looked like they were going to go Conservative, and then they went Liberal at the last minute. Can you also please explain to Hassan that the Northern Ireland Assembly is elected for proportional representation and that no party has a majority? I don't know that. I'm going to assume you're correct because you know your stuff about the UK. Lincoln was a dictator, king, tyrant that invaded the peaceful South. You mean the rebel nation that broke away from the country that they had no right to break away from because they wanted to continue to enslave and mistreat and abuse 4 million people? That sovereign? Yeah, that's not good enough. That's not going to fly in my book. I don't agree at all. Racism, imperialism is non-democratic countries is very different. If a country is not democratic, people are not to blame for the actions of a government. Yeah, kind of. Almost all dictatorships started off with a popular movement, though. Look at Hamas. Hamas was elected, duly elected, in 2005, and has clearly dictated the terms of Gaza, which has led to immense suffering for the Gazans. Exchange for their military service, rebellions, industrial revolution. Possibly all true, but also moral component, Tom. It was 1 second ago history. But if you want to be extremely technical, yes. But I look at modern history, contemporary history, as just as much authoritative, except without the legacy part, as ancient history, medieval history, or this like. Why did Britain side with France, not Germany, in the Great War? Germany violated Belgian neutrality. I actually said this earlier. Why did Putin claim that Cromwell and Stalin were similar? Because Putin, again, the whole point of Putin's historical propaganda, and Putin believes he is a historical savant, but he's really all just, again, the smoke and mirrors thing. Russia is not that strong right now, and Putin knows it, but he's projecting strength, and that appeals to people who can't see beyond the smoke and mirrors, can't see, who are not paying attention to the man behind the curtain. But Anoxia, Cromwell was in many ways dictatorial. He was extremely brutal. He was extremely effective. He revamped the British military in a way Stalin did through his Man of Steel. So there are some comparisons to be made. But what Putin is trying to do is to make a delineation and say that really the British are no better than the Soviets. So you should understand that we aren't that unlike. Again, it's all to sow seeds of doubt and create this feeling amongst the Europeans and Americans, and especially the Americans, that they have no reason to really be telling him what to do morally. They have no reason to back up the Ukraine. That Russia is secretly your friend. I don't believe it for a second. The stars and bars isn't the government flag of the Confederacy. It's just the war flag. That's true. And it's actually was the flag of Mississippi. Yeah. Well, have you ever read the stories about Viking people being sold in today's Middle East just to make it back to the Highlands? Imagine that. I've heard of that, yes. Northern Ireland is devolved from Westminster, writes its own laws just like different states. Yeah, just like Wales. I think Wales is like that. Scotland certainly is. It seems that the news from Japan has more and more problems with immigrants. Japan has really struggled with immigration all throughout its history. And you're an archipelago. Of course, you're going to have a different approach to immigration than mainland islands are, mainland countries. Britain is the same way, by the way. Except Britain's a little bit more friendly to immigrants in its history. It seems from the news that Japan... would Putin be doing any of this if he had hair? I don't know. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think it's all about Russian pride. I think he sees Stalin as the golden age and he wants to go back. Who is the most evil dictator in history? If you look at proportional suffering for his people, Pol Pot, Mao has the largest numbers. And Stalin is a Russian, so I'm particularly fascinated by Stalin. Not in a good way, though. I wonder if there were any other policies other than slavery that led to the South seceding. Tariffs... taxes, the cultural divide between the North and the South, the North developing a mercantile industry, and then the Industrial Revolution. There's a huge cultural divide between the North and the South that had started before the Revolution and really intensified when immigration became the mainstay of a labor force in the North, and slavery became the mainstay of a labor force in the South in the beginning of the 1800s. What is the topic today? Ask anything you want, Athog. You can vote on tomorrow's topic for our live stream lecture at 4 p.m. Eastern, and we are over an hour and 40 minutes. We're going to go 2 hours, so we've got another 20 minutes here, making up for lost time with you guys, and I really am enjoying it. So please like and subscribe if you haven't already. How is Russia not that strong when they are defying demands from the number one superpower, despite their myriad of sanctions, empty threats, crossing lines in some NATO? Well, they're not fighting a direct war with the United States, Great Britain, and France. They're fighting a proxy war, but they're fighting against the Ukrainians, who are much weaker, have less land, and far less power. So they aren't as strong as they would like you to think. Is it true that Putin wrestled and killed a bear with his true head? So for God's sakes. What about chimeras in Cambodia? Yes, that's Pol Pot. Yes, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales can pass their own laws as devolved matters. Is there a reason that you don't smile in your lives, or do you smile in your life outside? I don't want to force smiles. I don't. Sometimes people say something that I actually think is very funny, and I smile. I don't have a resting mean face, or resting, there's another word for it. My natural expression I don't think is hostile. This is friendly neighborhood history. I try to smile, but I'm not going to force a smile. I think that posing for the camera is something that I have always hated. Machines versus humans, machines, okay. Okay, I will take humans. Is there a reason that you don't smile? Oh, yeah, I already answered that. Brilliant brings to mind the African Samari. Sure. Have you ever heard about the Vikings that would go out and trade and sell to cheese? Pretty interesting part of the Viking history that some traded cheese to foreign lands. Yes, the Vikings were very interested in cheese, and dairy was really conducive to their environment. One of the reasons the Vikings went out and raided was because of a lack of farmland in Scandinavia. They needed ways to either get the gold or the resources to survive and not starve. Do you think the right has become closer to fascism recently, or was it always that way? Fascism was not a right-wing invention. Mussolini was a left-winger. Mussolini was a disenfranchised socialist who hated the idea of socialism being a universal application. So he turned on Marx, and Hitler himself called himself a socialist, National Socialist German Workers' Party. Now, does that mean they're the same as a Bernie Sanders-like figure? Not necessarily, but what it does mean is that socialism and fascism, or at least authoritarian socialism, which is really just communism, and fascism do have a history. I believe that in history, if you look at politics from a historical lens, there's a horseshoe. The left and the right do touch or get very close to touching. And we consider fascism the far right because of the militaristic, patriotic notions, because it's supported by the church, because the military will be very supportive of it, like Franco in Spain. Franco was fascistic. He wasn't a fascist himself. He had some proclivities towards fascism, but always knew how to actually be practical enough to stay in power and not just drone on about fascism. Mussolini was obsessed with it. I don't see fascism in its original intent as fully left-wing. I see Nazi as, I do see variations of that can be more right-wing, and Perón and Pinochet, and of course, again, Franco are good examples of right-wing dictators or people who at least use the right to control things. If you look at economically, it's not a right-wing concept to control the economy and determine what's going to be, and to partner with corporate interests to control the economy. That's not necessarily something that you get from the capitalistic side, but there is definitely some right-wing elements in fascist governments. And so I don't see the right as fascist necessarily. I don't see fascism as a fully right-wing thing. And I don't think it's, and if we're going to say it is, there's always been a fringe on the far right. It's just perhaps they feel more emboldened nowadays with people like Nick Fuentes and that stuff and the MAGA movement. I hear Putin made love to a horse. Just stop with the Putin stuff. Let me see here. And great to see you, Eric. Always a pleasure. Yep, true. Let me see. ChatGPT argue with me that communism was better than nationalism. Why are communist beliefs more socially accepted than nationalist? Because I can put a hashtag when I post a video here that says Stalin, but I can't put a hashtag that says Hitler. People really are horrified by the Nazis, as they should be. The Nazis were absolutely despicable, evil people. But we also but people, because it's so easy for us to centralize one evil and not to, in our minds, and not to think about the multiple evils that were going on at the same time. Because Stalin helped us win the war, there was always a little bit of more gracious acceptance, and then it was really after the war that was really like Stalin is the bad guy, because Americans always have their bogeyman, but Stalin actually was a bad guy. I think it's that people love the idea of sharing the wealth, of seizing the means of production, of workers owning everything. Those have appeals, socialism and communism, that Nazism never had those, although the Nazis had plenty of socialistic tendencies. Like I said, authoritarian governments on the right and the left do force business, do create command economies, and do create planned economies, and that is far more leftist than it is right-wing. And thank you, G-Man. I really appreciate that. It's so kind of you. And you're my favorite, too. I'm so glad that you're here. Let me see here. Is America calling themselves the back-to-back world champs? Well, they did win both of the war. I think they won all three world wars. They were helping the British defeat the French and Indians during their phase of the 7 Years' War. Then they win the Great War. They come in very late at the Great War. And then the last war, they are clearly the predominant power that wins the war. Let me see. Yes, but there's a new generation of Palestinians which were not alive when Hamas was elected. If there is no democracy, the government won't evolve with culture. That's true. Mussolini worked at a left-wing newspaper. True. You been to Napoleon's Boo? What? No. Do you think it's iconic that America holds the Super Bowl and North America only thing then calls itself a world champion? Yes, it's a very American thing. Thank you for subscribing, Matt Michaels. I really appreciate it. Any thoughts of the Scandinavian trade reaching the Mediterranean in the Bronze Age? It's possible. I wouldn't be surprised by it. I mean, we don't know a huge amount of a world outside of the sub-Mediterranean and the Eastern Mediterranean during the Bronze Age. Um, you're wrong, by the way. Hamas won with a plurality, not majority. There's been a lot of opinion polls that show a majority of support for Hamas, but then Hamas terrorizes and intimidates people, so there's that too. It's what proof you need to admit Israel want to get great Israel and just looking for an excuse to make it happen. Some people are, that's for sure. You got the settlers in the West Bank, but no, I don't think that that's the goal of most Israelis. How did Mussolini move from extreme left to extreme right? I think there's a horseshoe. I don't, again, and to be fair, for us, it could be that he always was on the left, and we've just been mistaken in thinking of fascism as a right-wing thing. Because the institutes that have supported fascism have been things like the military and the church, we think of it as right-wing. Because they hated communists, we think of them as right-wing. Although communists certainly hated each other. Look at what Stalin did to Trotsky and to Bukharin. Communists and socialists have had no problems when they've had power, abusing and killing each other. And then you look at Spain, and obviously the Republicans were democratic supporters, but there were plenty of communists who fought on that side against the nationalists, against the loyalists. So it's the fact that communism and socialism often fight against fascism that leads many to believe fascism is a right-wing phenomenon. The fact that Hitler hated communism is part of that, but it's not. But is it hatred because of antipathy because you're exactly the opposite, or is it hatred because you're so close to each other? You are both authoritarian, so you do have to see there's some similarities. It could be factional for all we know. Didn't the founder of fascism write that socialism is an important step for fascism? Well, yes, but Marx believed that socialism was an important step for communism, so he's probably just stealing from Marx there. Mussolini was paid by the MI5 during World War I in 1917. The British Secret Service paid Mussolini £100 a week, equivalent to about £6,000 a week today, to publish pro-war propaganda in his newspaper. That's true. When Italy was fighting the Austro-Hungarians, that was very important for them. Did Columbus talk to the natives? Heck, how does any foreign culture interact? I don't know. He must have had some sort of learning curve on the language. Thoughts on North Korea? Do you think we might have had the wrong perspective and maybe the North Koreans are actually happy and stable under the rule of Kim Jong-un? No. I don't think so. So anyways. Let me see. We're at an hour and 50 minutes. We've caught up to the chat. Hopefully you guys have liked and subscribed. I would really appreciate it if you do. You don't have to give a super chat or donate or become a member, but any money that you give to this channel helps us out, and we use it to make this channel better. Why did the... Oh, thank you, Juniper. Why did the Jews get expelled so many times since 2 millennia by so many different countries? Part of that is anti-Semitism. So this question I find to be fascinating. And again, I'm kind of sick of people asking about the whole Israel thing. It's just obsession to me, in my opinion. But thank you, Nathan, for subscribing. But try hard. On the one hand, and it's always the anti-Semites who bring up, oh, guess who's been expelled from this many countries? Without realizing that a huge reason why they were expelled from those countries was because of the anti-Semites to begin with. That's the real truth of the matter. The problem that they have with the Jews themselves leads to this argument that the Jews are this implication of the Jews always get themselves into trouble. But really, the truth of the matter is, in many of those cases, be it in Europe or in the Middle East, when those are many of the examples in the medieval Europe or in the Middle East following the 48 war, anti-Semitism and hatred of Jews is a huge reason why they were expelled in the first place. So the very people who bring that up as a way to to try to attack the Jews are actually showing how bad anti-Semitism is. Thank you, Harry, for being here and for moderating. I know it's very late over in the UK, so we'll be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, but I'm still here for another 10 minutes or so. Germany funding Lenin during the World War I turned around to haunt them. Well, yeah, but Lenin actually went cap in hand over and over back to the Germans in order to stay in power. The Bolsheviks never would have stayed in power if the Germans weren't using them to take Russia out of the war. Great job, Harry, moderating. Thank you so much. You can't answer what anti-Semitism. It means nothing. People don't like the Jews just like it. No reason behind it. People don't like the Jews for a myriad of reasons. Lack of cultural assimilation, overwhelming economic and social successes, the political, the structure of the Jewish religion has been hated from the Roman times. The Christians hated it. The Muslims hate it now. It's just part of the story. But yeah, and I'm not saying that the Jews have never done anything bad. or Jews in a certain country haven't done anything bad and then been expelled from that country for being that way. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that a lot of the examples of them being expelled is because of anti-Semitism, the same anti-Semitism that lies at the heart of the intended the reason for that question: why were they expelled? Ironically, it's anti-Semitism. So yeah, I think I've made my point. People might be stable in North Korea. It doesn't mean they are not oppressed. And their definition of stable is not the same definition of stable. It's like when they said in the Soviet Union things were good, but they weren't nearly as good by any stretch of the imagination as they were in the United States. Sheila Fitzpatrick wrote one of the most seminal works on the Russian Revolution, talked about how in the Soviet Union they were treading water with the United States because in the 1960s 20% of people had a fridge in their home. Wait a second. That's not the same as the United States. It was just that they're not all poor and dying. Doesn't mean that they're on par with the United States. People get jealous when they say they are the chosen people. That's part of it too, possibly. There are plenty of Jews who have a superiority complex, just like there's plenty of white people and black people and Asians who have superiority complexes. You can't. That's not. You're going to have racialists in your group. It's just impossible to avoid it. Did you pray the Fajr this morning? No. If I'm a Muslim, which I'm not going to confirm if I am or not, but salam to you, Henry, I might be a very bad Muslim. How did Napoleon Bonaparte get his army to 600,000 soldiers for the invasion of Russia in 1812? Drafting, conscription, mandatory service, those were very common. Einstein was very smart. And that's what people will bring up to me, knowing full well how much I despise the Bolsheviks. Oh, do you know that most of the Jews were Bolsheviks? Or most of the Bolsheviks were Jews. And so, well, of course, Trotsky and Lenin were Jews, but so was Jesus and so was Einstein. It's like, especially these right-wing people, gripers on the internet who want to talk about, most of them are Christians, want to talk about how, look at these bad Jews in the past. Well, Jesus was a Jew. The apostles were all Jews. The founder of the Christian religion was a Jew. His mother, who Catholics hold in very high regard, was a Jewish woman. He was a rabbi. I mean, for crying out loud. How do you get around that? And if you're somebody who's not even that, but you're anti-Jew for some reason, some of the most brilliant and most accomplished people in world history have been Jews. Einstein is a great example of that. What if you're gonna go? And I don't think it matters that Einstein was a Jew. I don't think any of that matters. But if you're going to bring up bad people were Jews, I'm going to bring up good people who were Jews. Just same way if you're going to bring up only good people are this, I'm going to bring up good people from other groups. It's just the way it is. It's like saying Genghis Khan was Asian. Well, yeah, so what? I mean, there's plenty of fantastic and incredible great Asians like Kublai Khan, if you're going to think of rulers or that sense, or Sun Tzu or Confucius. Jesus was not a Jew. Yes, thank you. I am so glad that the man who was called Rabbi, who was killed because he claimed to be a god, which was a breaking of the Jewish religious laws. I don't know if Tesla was Jewish. He might be. He was the son of God. Therefore, he was not the son of a Jew. Okay, let me talk about this in a Christian theological perspective with you, Elistra. If you just look at Christian theology, let's not even look at the fact that to all Jews who were alive at the time of Jesus, Jesus was the son of Joseph, who was a carpenter, who was a Jew. Jesus is God in Christian theology, but he's also human. He has to be human so he can die, and he has to be God so he can be perfect and die for sins in Christian theology. So he has to have a human nature, and he gets that human nature from his mother, who was a Jewish maiden named Mary. So Jesus is a Jew. In fact, if you believe that, he's a complete Jew, because his mother's a full Jew. And if you believe that he wasn't the son of God, if you don't believe that he's God, which is perfectly fine, the truth of the matter is that Jesus's father, Joseph, was a Jew. So I don't know how you can get that, even from a Christian perspective. Just absurdity. I mean, this is the son of David, he was called. He was, David, the Davidic kingdom. He supposedly considers himself to be king of the Jews. In fact, that's what's nailed above him on on every crucifix. You'll see INRI. Jesu Nazarethum Rex Judaeum, the Jesus of Nazareth, the king of the Jews. Are Muslims pagans since they circle Kaaba in trance and kiss stone thinking that it absorbed their sins? No. Islam is not paganic. Islam is, in fact, the antithesis to paganism and really kind of smashed the paganism of the Arabian Peninsula. How America can be an empire for eternity. It cannot be an empire for eternity. The hegemonic thing might get it away without being called an empire. Empires tend to get very bloated and arrogant. The United States is no exception. However, looking at itself as a hegemonic empire might save it some of the embarrassment and arrogant and errors that empires have had. What made Napoleon Bonaparte retreat from Moscow? The Russians burned the capital. Scorched earth. They went scorched earth on their very own cultural capital. In fact, St. Petersburg was the capital. But Napoleon wanted Moscow because he knew it was the heart of the Russian society. Yeah, Napoleon was awesome. And I understand, and I have said, and I've gotten criticized for this, that Napoleon, you can justify Napoleon's invasion of Russia, and you can justify Barbarossa. We all look back on, oh, Hitler and Napoleon, look at how the Russians just handed it to him. No, I completely understand why Hitler felt that Barbarossa would work, and it looked like it was going to. And I completely understand why Napoleon looked like it was going to work. Now, Alexander I was extremely formidable, as was Stalin. But the truth of the matter is, after Borodino, Napoleon had nothing to stop him. The Russians burned their capital and then just wait for winter, and then a guerrilla war is able to destroy the French army. But the Russians basically took their own cultural life, if you will, in order to stop Napoleon. And that was not something he expected. So history is so easy in retrospect to look back and say, oh yeah, silly Napoleon. The invasion made total sense and he was about to win. The Grande Armée didn't crush the Russians at Borodino, but it was pretty impressive the way the Russians fought back. I'm not taking anything away from them. I'm saying I understand why Napoleon invaded Russia. It's such a fascinating story. I can talk about it forever. Napoleon is my favorite historical person, and the Russians are my favorite historical people. So there you go. Hello, little bro. Sorry if you didn't get in, but 6'7". People just get jealous when they say they are chosen people. Why do they call Bernie Sanders a socialist? I'm curious about this because his ideas are about fair wages and free healthcare. And honestly doesn't think that's a bad thing. I could be wrong. He calls himself a democratic socialist. So he does accept the label of a socialist. Let me see. Tesla was Jewish. We talked about that. About history on your channel, I'm impressed with your knowledge. Well, go and check out the long form videos, the short form videos. You'll learn a lot, hopefully. Jesus, Muhammad, and Allah are BS. I don't know that Allah is the name of God. The Arabic Christians use Allah to refer to, they pronounce it a little differently, to refer to the Christian God. But Jesus seems to have been a historical figure. I don't know that Muhammad was a historical figure, to be completely honest with you. We don't find concrete evidence that Mecca existed. If you accept even the most pro-Islamic sources, the writings about Muhammad come from centuries after he was living. And if you accept the most liberal Christian sources, Jesus' apostles or followers of his apostles were writing about him a century after he died. So, and that's the most liberal Christian sources, the most conservative Islamic sources. And Muhammad lived 500 years later. I don't hate Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, or anything. I even love Confucius. Confucius says to be kind and respectful. Yes, we all need that. We could all use Confucius's Stoicism. Yes, his mother was a Jew, I'm not trying to be upset with you, but his mother was a Jew, so you have to admit that Jesus was indeed a Jew, and he was called Rabboni all the time, which is a Aramaic term for rabbi. Let me see here. Did God ask for Mary's consent? Oh, geez. I'm not going to talk about religion too much more. Understanding from Christian theology, from what I understand of it historically, it's not what you think. There are some people who believe that God didn't in fact have physical relations with Mary to produce Jesus. But the narrative is that a miracle gave her the fetus, the embryo, that it became Jesus. I don't know. Let me see. Tesla was a Serb. Yeah, he was a Serb. He wasn't religious in the slightest, though all his relatives indeed were baptized in Serbian Orthodox. That doesn't mean he wasn't ethnically Jewish. Let me see. Jesus was human with omnipotent capabilities like multiplying food, carrying the sick, and having people defy gravity. Well, that's if you believe the Gospels. Why is this? What? Mama, are you just racist, mean, and bitter, and that's why you're here? What kind of ship is in the background? These are Spanish galleons. I'm glad you asked. Speaking of the age of exploration and the Spanish Empire. Why does Christianity see a Jew as their God? Because Christianity is founded by a Jew. All the apostles were Jews. If you are a Catholic, the first pope was a Jew. Christianity starts as a sect of Judaism that believed that their Messiah was Yeshua ben Joseph, who was ben Yosef, his son, Jesus, the son of Joseph, a carpenter who called himself a Messiah. So we're Persians pagan. In some ways, but you have paganism, and I think of paganism, I think of polytheistic, mythic religions that border on mythology, like the Greeks. Persians were, of course, almost every civilization was pagan in its earliest days, but Persia before, under the Sassanids, for instance, who were destroyed by the Muslims, Persia was Zoroastrian, which is monotheistic. What proves you need to admit Israel wants to get great Israel no matter what cost. I want overwhelming proof from the overwhelming percentage of people in Israel that they want that, not just a few fringe, ultra-Orthodox people who are trying to do that. Talk about the difference between Japan and China in terms of tech development. Japan got a lot of its technology from China, but in the 19th century, Japan outdid China with the Meiji Restoration. China never went through that, so a lot of its influence and culture was divided by the spheres of influence of Great Britain and France and the United States and Germany. Russia was in there too. Japan was far more self-sufficient and industrialized a lot quicker during the Meiji Restoration. Why did America make states so big, but whole countries so smaller in Europe? Why not make many more small states out of small? Because you don't have centuries of cultural drift, cultural differences, and warfare between them. America had more space, and these lands, of course, were taken from the natives. Talk about the difference between Japan. I already did. I think Putin likens himself to St. Peter a little bit and wants the old. Yeah, true. Let me see here. Peace be upon him. If a continental system was never enacted, do you believe French hegemony would have endured? Yes, if he had just allowed, if it was all about defeating the British, he knew he couldn't do it. He had lost too many naval battles like Trafalgar. But Napoleon really felt that he could, and Ayu Deji is so good to see. Deji, it's so good to see you. We've got a lot of great old faces here today. But if he had just allowed the Russians to trade with Britain, which was central to the Russian economy, Alexander wouldn't have turned on him. He wouldn't have invaded Russia, and he probably would have stayed in power. Yeah. Let me see. Bro, you look like you have at least 3 pending abuse cases, 5 divorces, and 10 unrecognized children. Also probably have a whiskey cellar and old bourbon cigars. The last 2 parts are true. As for the rest, won't comment. But thank you for believing that I'm virile enough to father 10 children. Let me see here. Talk about the difference. I already did. Did the skinny mustache man hit the same wall as Napoleon Bonaparte? Yes, Russian resilience is a wall that you hit all the time. Why did America make states so big but whole countries? I already answered that. Is Jesus a real person used as a patsy by some of our people in Bible times? Probably not. He's definitely a real person, definitely seemed to believe in himself as something more than just human. What are we talking about now? Well, we were on a bunch of different stuff. And Hars, can you put the video for the Varna system and the video on World War I, the real World War I, in the chat so people can go and watch those links on their own? People have been asking a bunch of different questions. Do you think Russia wanting to hurt Belarus, Georgia, and Moldova, and with Ukraine on top back under their strict control is a good move morally from political? It's morally very, very puzzling. It takes away people's freedoms. It's probably going to put them in a repressive regime. So morally, it seems pretty bankrupt. Let me see. Cebu City was one of Spain's first colonies. Any idea why the name Cebu was chosen? No. Why do they teach us Columbus found America? Yet people say it's false. He didn't find America. The natives did. He wasn't the first European. The Vikings were. But he was the first to create sustained long-term contact, SLC, between Europe and the New World. It's probably the more appropriate way to say it. Did you ever live in ancient Elam or Sumeria? Oh, interesting. Probably Sumeria. You got a lot going on there under Hammurabi. Why do they teach, out of all the most controversial topics on this channel, which is your favorite? Woodrow Wilson, War of 1812, Donald Trump, or Israel? Israel, because there's so much ancient history there that's so fun to talk about. Was Muhammad a abuser of children? Probably. Zoroastrianism is an amazing religion. That's another beautiful religion they should bring back. It's official. We need to bring back Confucianism. Interesting. Zoroastrians worshipped Zoroaster was the prophet. Arazavan, something, it starts with an A, was the god, and he's the god of fire, but he's benevolent. It's an interesting religion. Being Jewish is not Christianity in today's terms, unless you think of crazy sects and like people don't compare or complain them. Yeah. Why is it often said that democracy came from the Bible, while Western civilization democracy started in ancient Greece, predates Christianity so much? Well, the Bible predates ancient Greece. At least some of the events in the Bible would predate ancient Greece. Christianity is not the Bible itself. But ancient Greek democracy is a huge influence on that. but that survives in the Christian West and continues to have influence as seen as harmonious with a lot of Christian values. So you have the values of the Judeo-Christian ethic combined with the politics of the Greeks and the Romans, and that's how you find the American system, for instance. Thank you for believing that I'm fertile enough to father 10 children. Yes. I said virile, but fertile is fine too. I think men are virile, women are fertile. Yes, that's how it goes. Is there any history if why the Native Americans split into different groups, and was there a unified kingdom prior? No, there wasn't. There was various different tribes and clans that fought with each other. Just look at Scotland. It's not impossible for that to happen in other places of the world. Why did Austria... Oh, also, if you want to learn the real story of Macbeth, watch the video Hars is going to put in the chat. Why did Austria want to be part of Germany before World War II, World War III? Consolidation of power was huge for Austria after it lost Hungary and all of the Yugoslavian countries. Austria and Germany had obviously the same language, similar backgrounds, similar culture. It was a way of licking its wounds from the Great War. Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda. I love that. It's such a cool name. That sounds like a great name for a dog. My dog, Ahura Mazda, is the god of ancient Persia and Zoroastrianism. Yes, fascinating stuff. Wasn't Mithraism taken from Zoroastrianism? It might have been. And Mithraism is also supposedly influenced by or influenced on Christianity. Take a wild guess. How a Geminian world would look like in 20 years. And see if we're going to be the United States still on top or China. Did you know burqa and gender segregation and having multiple wives and all of that started in Zoroastrianism? Islam copy that? Interesting. The burqa started in Persia. Fascinating. I didn't know that. If 2 men catch 2 fish in 2 minutes, how many men to catch 600 fish in 600 minutes? This is why I hate math. Did Hungary speak German? Well, they do, but that's not their main language. Habsburg didn't want to bend the knee to Prussia. They didn't, but they were gone by that point. Bro, please cover America sponsoring the Afghan jihad and its role in rising spread of jihad around the world. This will be my last question because we've gone 2 hours and 10 minutes. But basically, yeah, it would be 1. I know that. But basically, the United States supports the Mujahideen and other movements, including a young man named Osama bin Laden, to defeat the Soviets in the Cold War in the Afghan invasion from 1979 to 1990. This is a huge part of American foreign policy to destabilize the Soviet Union under the Reagan administration. And of course, the Taliban is kind of the successor to this in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And of course, that eventually leads to Osama bin Laden turning on the United States and trying to destroy it, thinking of it as an evil institution, and this eventually will lead to 9/11 and the War on Terror. Kaliningrad Oblast exists. I don't know why it does. History Matters has a great video on that, and I love History Matters. It's my favorite history channel on YouTube, other than my own. So please go watch them. Why did the United Kingdom stop sharing intelligence? Should we be worried about an attack? Possibly, unless they're just being jerks. I said the same thing about Lenin. Came back to haunt the rest of the world. True. Thank you so much for answering all the questions. You must be exhausted. Please go rest your big, beautiful brain. Oh, you're so nice, Juniper. Yes, I am going to rest my brain, but hopefully it'll take a little while to recover. But tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern, I will be back. Yeah. Oh, King Doopy, a member. That's why he has the emoji is asking something. So I'm going to answer a member asking a question, especially in the dark and during seas. Who is an explorer that needs more regard and why? Love the background. Ooh, that's a great one. I think Da Gama. Going around, establishing Portuguese contact with India, going around the Cape of Good Hope. I think Da Gama doesn't get enough love in Portuguese exploration history. So yes, look at some more stuff on Vasco da Gama. What is your least favorite controversial topic of the channel? Definitely Woodrow Wilson, because I feel like we've just beating the dead horse there. Do you have bullet points in front of you, or is it just retention? Do you know much British history? Watch my video series on the British monarchs, and go watch my long form video on tier ranking the British monarchs. No, the Basques did not discover America, but they are fascinating people. Anyways, so, and thank you so much. Please like and subscribe on your way out. It always helps the channel. Anything you want to give to the channel is up to you. No pressure. But they might if they become more rare. That's true. But I'll see you guys tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for a really great live stream Q&A. This is very, very rejuvenating. I've been going through a lot, so it's really great to have the energy to go with you guys all the way through. Check out our short form videos every day, our long form videos. I don't know if I'll be able to do one tonight, but please subscribe. Yes, thank you, Hars. I really appreciate that. Have a great rest of your evening. We'll see you back tomorrow. Go vote for the topic for tomorrow's live stream lecture, 4 p.m. Eastern. And as